What if the most feared creature in a medieval village was not a wolf, a plague rat, or a shadow in the forest, but a cat? Tonight, you step into a world of candlelit cottages, muddy streets, church bells, and whispered fears where a black cat crossing the road could feel like a warning from the dark itself. People needed cats to guard their grain from mice, yet feared them for their silence, their glowing eyes, and their mysterious lives after sunset. So before we enter this strange medieval night, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these quiet journeys into the past. Now dim the lights, settle in, and let's discover why cats were blamed for evil in the Middle Ages. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself beneath the outer gate of a medieval town just as dusk lowers its grey woolen hood over the fields. Cold stone presses its damp breath against your shoulder. Straw clings wetly to your boots. Smoke curls in the rafters of the gatehouse. And somewhere beyond the wall a bell gives one tired note after another. Torches gutter in the wind. Horse breath hangs pale in the winter air. River mist crawls along the road behind you, as if even the water would rather sleep indoors tonight. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You clutch your cloak tighter, already suspecting that you probably would not last a week out here, not with mud in every seam and turnip pottage as a lifestyle. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the gatekeeper squints at you as though you might be carrying unpaid tolls, comment where you're watching from and what the local time is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand beneath the gate arch as the last carts creak inward from the road, their wheels biting deep into mud that shines like black broth in the torchlight. The town wall rises above you in patched stone and timber, not majestic exactly, but stubborn, like an old man who refuses to die because there is still ale in the cellar. The gatekeeper wears a fur-lined cap gone bald at the edges, and he holds an iron key large enough to discourage both thieves and conversation. He asks your business, though not with much energy. It has been a long day of counting sacks, peering under wagon covers, and deciding whether 3 chickens count as household goods or market goods. A matter so important that men have surely argued over it while empires rose and fell. You tell him you seek lodging, warmth, and perhaps a bowl of something that has not recently stared back at you. He sniffs, looks at your boots, then at your face, then at the darkening road beyond. Behind you, a dog with one torn ear noses at a broken cartwheel abandoned beside the ditch. You notice the dog a mile back, trotting behind a fishmonger's cart, and now it seems to have decided that you are the least suspicious person available. This is not high praise in a medieval town, but it is companionship of a kind. The gatekeeper lifts his lantern, and in that trembling pool of light, something black slips between the cartwheels. A cat, lean, narrow-shouldered, with eyes like 2 drops of wet amber. It moves so silently that even the mud seems to make room for it. Its tail rises in a careful question mark as it passes beneath the gate chain and vanishes along the wall toward the first crooked lane of houses. A woman carrying a basket of coarse bread crosses herself. "Saints guard us," she murmurs, not loudly, but loudly enough for nearby ears. The gatekeeper clicks his tongue. It is only a cat. "A black one," says the woman. "A hungry one," says the gatekeeper, "which is worse for mice than for souls." No one laughs much, though one cart driver gives the small, tired breath that passes for laughter after a day spent hauling turnips through ruts. You watch the place where the cat disappeared, and already you feel the little tightening in the crowd, the way people glance toward doorways and shutters, toward the alleys where shadows gather early. In this town, as in many towns, cats live close to people, but not quite with them. They pass under tables, sleep near ovens, hunt beneath grain bins, and appear at windows when no one remembers opening them. They are useful, certainly. Mice and rats are no small matter where bread is precious, cheese sweats in storehouses, and winter can turn one bad harvest into a slow punishment. Yet usefulness does not save a creature from suspicion. Sometimes it sharpens it. No one can quite agree whether cats are blessed because they keep vermin from the flour, cursed because they roam at night, or simply rude little nobles wearing fur. The last view seems the easiest to prove. You step through the gate after the carts, and the town closes around you. The street is narrow, slick, and deeply alive with the smells of evening wood smoke, wet wool, horse dung, frying onions, fish scales, old ale, damp leather, and the faint sourness of rushes ready to be swept from floors. Houses lean over the lane as if sharing secrets. Their upper stories jut outward, beams dark with rain, shutters half closed against the cold. Here and there, little lamps glow behind horn-paned windows. Blurred and golden, a child's laugh flickers somewhere indoors, quickly hushed. A hammer knocks 3 times from a smithy. Farther off, a cow objects to existence. You pass beneath a hanging sign painted with a faded moon, then a row of stalls being folded for the night. A woman covers her baskets of apples with sacking. A butcher scrubs his board with water that has lost all hope of being clean. A seller of ribbons and pilgrim badges ties his wares shut, the tiny stamped tokens of saints clicking softly together like thin coins. Above one doorway hangs a horseshoe, nailed open-end upward to hold luck, or downward to pour luck, depending on whom you ask and how confidently they enjoy being wrong. Beside another door, someone has tied a sprig of rowan with red thread, the kind of charm that is not quite church teaching and not quite pagan memory, but lives comfortably between the two, like many things that survive in cold places. The black cat appears again at the far end of the lane. It sits upon a rain barrel, washing one paw with grave attention. Torchlight catches the edge of its ears. For a moment it looks less like an animal than a small judge in a fur robe, taking notes on the entire town and finding it poorly managed. A young apprentice carrying a bundle of firewood stops so abruptly that one log rolls into the mud. "Do not let it cross," he whispers to the older man beside him. "It has crossed already," the man says. "Then we should go another way. The other way is full of pigs." The apprentice considers this. In medieval life, superstition often meets practical difficulty and has to negotiate. After a moment, both men step around the cat at a wide, awkward angle, trying to look casual while giving the rain barrel enough space for a bishop. The cat continues washing. It has ruined their courage without rising from its seat. You walk on, feeling the cold settle into your fingers. The tawny-eared dog follows, though carefully, with one eye on the cat. The street bends toward the market square, where the day's noise has thinned into evening mutters. A few merchants remain under awnings, bargaining over the last goods by lantern glow. You see smoked fish hanging from hooks, hard loaves stacked like stones, onions braided into ropes, and small bundles of herbs marked with bits of coloured thread. Rosemary for remembrance, rue for protection, fennel for the stomach, and a dozen more whose virtues depend upon the seller's confidence and the buyer's desperation. Near the well, 2 old men lean on staffs and discuss the weather, as if personally offended by it. Above all this, the bell rings again from the church tower. Not a grand peal, only the measured call of evening, telling bodies to come indoors, fires to be covered, shutters to be barred, prayers to be said. Time here does not belong to clocks in every pocket. It belongs to bells, light, hunger, labour, and the ache in your feet. When the bell sounds, people listen, even those who pretend not to. You follow a narrow lane toward the inn recommended by the gatekeeper, a place he called decent, by which he seemed to mean that the roof had not fallen in this week. Its doorway glows ahead, low and yellow. Smoke leaks from a hole in the roof, then gives up and clings under the eaves. A bundle of rushes lies beside the threshold, ready to freshen the floor, though from the smell drifting out, freshen is doing heroic work. Just before you reach the door, the cat slips down from a wall and crosses the lane in front of you. There is black fur, silent paws, amber eyes. It pauses in the middle of the muddy path and looks up at you as if it has been expecting you specifically, which is unsettling, because nothing good in the Middle Ages expects you specifically, except tax collectors and fleas. The dog freezes behind your legs. From the inn doorway, a maid with a pewter jug spots the scene and makes a tiny sound in her throat. "Best spit," she says. You turn toward her. "For luck," she adds, as if that explains everything. You do not spit, though you think about it, mostly because everyone is watching, and it feels rude to refuse local customs when you have not yet secured supper. The maid shrugs, deciding perhaps that travellers have strange habits. Inside the inn, someone mutters that cats see what people hide. Someone else answers that cats see mice, and that is enough witchcraft for one night. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the trouble begins with the cat, with the fear of the cat, or with the kind of town that needs something small and silent to blame when winter presses too close. The cat blinks once. Then it walks to the inn door, slips inside ahead of you, and vanishes into warmth. You step after it. Inside, the air folds around you, smoky and thick, almost soft after the cold street. The hall is low-beamed and dim, lit by beeswax candles near the better table and tallow dips near everyone else, because even light has ranks here. Rushes cover the stone floor, mingled with old herbs that release faint scents when trodden underfoot. Wet cloaks hang from pegs. A pot of pottage bubbles near the hearth, giving off the humble comfort of peas, onions, barley, and whatever bone has been persuaded to contribute. Men and women sit along benches with wooden bowls, trenchers of stale bread, and cups of ale safer than much of the water outside. No one looks wealthy, but everyone looks grateful to be indoors. You settle near the hearth, palms turned toward the fire, and the torn-eared dog curls under the bench as though he has always belonged to you. Somewhere beneath a cupboard, the black cat makes a small sound in the dark. A scratch, a pause, then the squeak of a mouse, brief as a bad thought. The room grows quiet for half a breath. Then the innkeeper says, "Well, evil or not, it earns its keep." A few people chuckle, softly this time, and the tension loosens like thawing rope. Yet not completely. You can feel the old unease lingering in the smoky rafters, woven through prayer, hunger, habit, and rumour. A cat may guard the grain and still trouble the dreams. A creature may be needed and feared in the same breath. And as you take your first spoonful of hot, pepperless, deeply sincere pottage, you understand that tonight's road has brought you not merely into a town, but into a world where darkness has many shapes, and one of them has just slipped silently beneath the cupboard. The innkeeper's judgment settles over the room with the same practical weight as a ladle set down on oak. Evil or not, the cat earns its keep. That seems to satisfy everyone just enough to return to the business of being tired. You sit closer to the hearth, letting the heat creep back into your fingers by slow degrees, as though your hands are suspicious of comfort and require convincing. The pottage in your bowl is thick with barley and onion, and there may be a ribbon of cabbage in it, unless that is a leaf that wandered in and decided to make itself useful. Either way, it is warm, which in this century counts as a culinary triumph. Rushes crackle under boots as people shift on the benches. The floor has been strewn with them fresh enough to release a green, faintly sweet smell beneath the heavier odours of wet wool, smoke, ale, and damp hay from the lean-to stable beyond the wall. The innkeeper's wife moves from table to table with a cloth over one arm, wiping what can be wiped and ignoring what has clearly formed a permanent alliance with the wood. A servant girl hangs another cloak on a peg, wrings water from her sleeves, and ducks when a man near the door shakes rain from his cap with all the care of a dog leaving a riverbank. Medieval manners, you begin to suspect, are mostly an arrangement by which people forgive one another for being cold. The black cat emerges from beneath the cupboard carrying the mouse in its mouth. It walks through the hall with the calm of a minor lord reviewing his lands. Nobody tries to stop it. A little boy at the next bench watches with round eyes and a crust of bread in his fist. His mother pulls his hand away from the animal's path. "Do not stare," she whispers. "It is only a cat," says the boy. "That is what worries me." The cat passes under a stool and disappears again near the hearthstones, where the shadows are warm and thick. The torn-eared dog under your bench lifts his head, gives one offended huff, and then remembers that he is indoors and fed by no one in particular, so diplomacy wins out. He lowers his muzzle back onto his paws and sighs like a clerk asked to work through a feast day. Around you, the hall settles into its evening rhythm. A pair of carters share a trencher of smoked fish and coarse bread, dipping each bite into mustard so sharp it seems capable of removing regret. Near the door, a woman with a basket of eggs wrapped in straw counts them again, as though fear itself might have cracked one. Two pilgrims sit by the wall, their cloaks pinned with lead badges from shrines farther south, murmuring over sore feet and market tolls. One of them has tied a little sprig of dried vervain to his satchel strap to keep away ag, thieves, and perhaps bad conversation, though no herb has yet mastered the last of those. The old woman enters your notice gradually, the way certain figures do in firelight, as if the room has kept her in reserve. She sits on a stool near the chimney breast with a wool blanket across her knees, and a face lined so finely it looks carved by years of weather and opinion. Her cap is plain, but at her throat hangs a tiny pewter charm in the shape of a hand. 2 fingers extended, a protection sign meant to ward off the evil eye. Some swear such little charms work best when hidden beneath the shift. Others wear them openly, perhaps on the theory that if misfortune sees you prepared, it may take the hint and trouble someone else. She is shelling dried peas into a bowl one by one, though slowly enough that it is clear the peas are merely an excuse to sit near the warmest part of the room and supervise the world. You notice that people lower their voices around her, not out of fear exactly, but out of the respect granted to those who have outlived enough winters to become part oracle, part furniture. The innkeeper's wife brings her a cup of warmed ale with a little honey in it and says, "Tell them your tale, Nan." They are at it again. What the old woman asks. "A cat," says the wife, with the tone of someone resigned to both the topic and the species. Nan lifts her eyes to you and to the others gathered in the soft ring of firelight. If they want foolishness, they may have some. It costs less than candles. A few people smile. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she believes her own stories entirely, or simply knows that a winter evening without superstition feels underdressed. You draw your bench a little nearer, not obviously nearer, just the respectful amount one shifts when a room is about to become interesting. Nan taps 2 peas into the bowl and begins. In my mother's day, she says, there was a cat in the lower lane, white-footed and black as soot, that would sit beside a cradle and watch the babe sleep. At once the servant girl near the pegs crosses herself. Was it a devil, asks the little boy before his mother can stop him. It was a cat, Nan says. Do not race ahead. The hall gives a small murmur of amusement. She continues, her voice rough but steady. The babe sickened, as babes do. It coughed in the night and would not feed right. By morning it was blue about the lips. The mother swore the cat had sat too close and stolen its breath. A carter snorts gently into his cup. Cat stealing breath again. Some swear that they do. Nan says, unbothered. Slip onto the chest of a sleeping child, drawn by the milk scent, and take in the warm air. Others say that is nurse talk, meant to keep beasts from the cradle and mothers from sleeping too hard. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. You glance toward the shadows under the bench, where the dog sleeps in a heap, and toward the hearth, where the cat's eyes flash briefly and vanish. In a world where drafts creep under doors, fevers come without warning, and infants are heartbreakingly fragile. An explanation with whiskers must seem almost merciful. Better a creature you can chase away than the shapeless hand of chance. Nan warms her fingers on the cup. My grandmother said cats love the company of spirits, for both favour thresholds, ovens, and the quiet hour before dawn. If a cat stares at an empty corner, she would throw a pinch of salt into the fire. Why, asks one pilgrim. To remind whatever is there that the house is occupied, Nan replies. That earns a low laugh, the other pilgrim says. In my village they say if a cat washes behind its ears by the door, rain is coming. That one is true, says the innkeeper's wife. But then, so are clouds. The room chuckles. It is the kind of joke that does not strain anyone, merely turns over like a log on the fire and glows for a moment. The egg woman joins in from the next table. My sister-in-law says a cat seen near a bride's bed is a bad sign. Everything is a bad sign near a bride's bed, mutters one of the carters, earning a smack on the shoulder from his companion and a rare smile from Nan. Mind your tongue, the old woman says, though she is clearly amused. Still, there are sayings. If a cat sneezes near a new wife, there will be quarrels. If it curls on the best blanket, visitors come. If it howls at the door, death is near. She shrugs inside her blanket. People hang meaning on a cat the way they hang onions from rafters. Easy to do, and often in the way. The servant girl, who's been listening with her hands pressed flat to her apron, speaks up. My aunt said a cat should never be left alone with spinning wool overnight, else it tangles the thread and carries your luck into the dark. The innkeeper, passing with a fresh jug, says, that sounds less like sorcery and more like ordinary cat behaviour. Another ripple of laughter moves through the hall. Even suspicion cannot entirely overcome the fact that cats are, at heart, excellent at being troublesome in very earthly ways. Still, the unease remains. You hear it in how people lower their voices at certain moments. You see it in the signs they make with their fingers, in the little bead charms sewn to children's caps, in the sprig of rowan above the hearth, in the iron knife laid quietly beneath a cradle in the corner room beyond the partition. A knife under a cradle, an old trick against elf shot, nightmares, witches, and anything else that might fancy a baby more than its parents do. Medieval parenting. You reflect involves a touching faith in sharp objects. Nan's eyes drift toward the fire. "I knew a woman once," she says more softly, "whose cat would not leave her bed the week her husband lay dying. Sat on the chest at the footboard all night, staring toward the door. She said it watched something come and go. Whether that is true, no one can say. But after he was gone, she kept the creature and fed it cream on holy days. Said it had done its duty." The hall falls still for a few breaths. Outside, wind brushes the shutters. Somewhere in the lane a cart rattles past and then fades. The bell from the church does not sound now. Its silence feels almost as present as its ringing did earlier. Firelight paints the rafters orange and leaves soot-black hollows above. The cat emerges once more, circles twice upon a folded bit of sackcloth by the hearth, and lies down with its tail over its nose, as if tired of being the subject of theology. You finish your pottage and accept a wool blanket from the servant girl, who directs you to a bench near the wall where travellers are allowed to sleep. The blanket smells of lanolin, smoke, and 100 previous shoulders. It is glorious. Around you, people begin to settle. Cups are drained. Candles shorten. The pilgrims loosen their shoes and groan like men lowering church bells by hand. The little boy is carried upstairs half asleep, one arm around his mother's neck. Nan tips the last of her warmed ale into her mouth, gathers her peas, and rises with the dignity of a queen retiring from court. If the queen in question has opinions about root vegetables and cold chimneys, as you stretch out on the bench with your cloak under your head, you watch the cat through half-lowered eyes. It does not look wicked. It looks warm. Yet warmth itself has power on a winter night, and anything that moves freely between hearth and shadow begins to gather stories around it. Here in the smoky heart of the inn, with rushes underfoot and wool over your chest, you begin to feel how fear grows in such places, not always from cruelty, but from weariness, grief, and the need to name what cannot be held. The black cat sleeps by the fire. The dog snores under your bench. The embers shift softly, and in the low breathing dark, the town's suspicions curling close, like creatures settling for the night. By the time the last candle sinks into its own little pool of wax, the inn has become a country of breathing shadows. You lie beneath the wool blanket with your cloak folded under your head, listening to the roof creak, the hearth settle, and the dog under your bench snore with the confidence of a creature who pays no rent. The black cat remains curled near the ashes, only the pale tips of its whiskers visible when the embers brighten. It has crossed your path, eaten its mouse, endured an evening of moral suspicion, and gone to sleep without making any formal defence. There is something admirable in that. The bell wakes you before dawn. Not loudly, not cruelly, but steadily, far off and iron cold, marking the hour when monks rise and ordinary people pretend not to hear. For a moment you do not know where you are. Then the smells return: smoke, stale ale, rushes, wool, damp boots. Someone coughs in the dark. Someone mutters a prayer. The innkeeper moves like a broad shadow near the hearth, coaxing yesterday's coals into today's fire with a twist of straw. Sparks wake and climb, tiny golden souls escaping the ash. You sit up slowly, every bone remembering the bench. Medieval bedding, you decide, has been invented mostly to make straw feel ambitious. The dog opens one eye, sees that no breakfast has occurred, and closes it again. Near the hearth, the black cat rises, stretches so long it seems to become two cats joined at the middle, then pads toward the door as if summoned by a bell meant only for it. You follow soon after, because the innkeeper's wife tells you the monastery guest house lies beyond the north lane, and if you wish to hear learned men argue about cats, monks will do it with ink, patience, and very cold feet. Outside, morning has not quite arrived. The town crouches beneath a bluish dark. Frost rims the water trough. Shutters are closed, but thin smoke already leaks from chimneys, and somewhere a baker's boy carries a covered tray with the solemnity of a knight bearing a relic. The mud in the lane has hardened at the edges and softened in the middle, which is the road's way of offering you every possible inconvenience at once. You pass the market square, now empty except for straw, broken cabbage leaves, and one abandoned glove stiff with frost. The church tower rises black against the paling sky. A carved saint above the door looks down with a face so worn by weather that it is hard to tell whether he is blessing the town or regretting it. Beyond the square, the lane narrows between high walls until you reach the monastery gate, a smaller arch than the town's, but sterner, with iron hinges blackened by age and a little hatch at eye level. You knock. A pause follows, long enough for repentance. The hatch opens, one eye appears, pale and suspicious. Guest house, you say. The eye studies you, your cloak, your boots, and the torn-eared dog, who's apparently decided that dawn is an excellent time to continue your partnership. Pilgrim, asks the voice. Traveller? That is what pilgrims say when they are uncertain. The hatch closes, a bar lifts, the gate opens inward, and a lay brother wrapped in a brown cloak gestures you inside. He is thin, red-nosed, and carrying a lantern that throws more shadow than light. He looks at the dog. It follows, you explain. Many errors do, he says, and leads you across the yard. The monastery wakes by degrees. You pass a wash place where a novice splashes his face and gasps like a man betrayed by creation. You hear sandals slap stone, doors open, throats clear for prayer. The cloister walks are slick with frost, and the garth at the centre lies silvered and still, its herb beds tucked under straw against the cold. Rosemary, sage, rue, and hyssop sleep there beneath the winter covering, waiting for warmer days and human ailments. Monks rely on such plants for everything from stomach trouble to melancholy, though no one can quite agree whether melancholy is best treated by prayer, wine, or being told firmly to stop having it. In the guest house, a small fire burns under a smoke-stained hood. You are given bread, a cup of thin ale, and a place on a bench near the wall. Hospitality here is not luxurious, but it is orderly, and after the inn's noble chaos, order feels almost exotic. A beeswax candle burns near a shelf of bowls. Its flame is steady, and its smell is faintly sweet, cleaner than the tallow dips of the hall. The lay brother warns you not to wander into the cloister during prayer, not to touch the books, and not to feed the kitchen cat. There is a kitchen cat, you ask? There are always kitchen cats, he says. That is part of the trouble. You're not alone long. After the morning office, 2 monks enter the guest house with the particular silence of men trained to move indoors without disturbing either God or parchment. One is broad and sleepy-eyed, with ink on his thumb. The other is narrow-faced, sharp as a quill, and holds his sleeves carefully away from the fire. The lay brother introduces them as Brother Martin and Brother Elred. Brother Martin nods warmly. Brother Elred nods as if nodding costs money. So, says Brother Martin, noticing the dog beneath your bench, you have brought a witness. He brought himself, you say. A common miracle, Martin replies. Dogs often appoint themselves to journeys. Cats appoint themselves to judgments. At that moment, as if called by insult or prophecy, a grey monastery cat steps into the room from the passage. It is not the black cat from the inn, though for a sleepy second you wonder whether all cats share one secret road. This one has a white chin, ragged ears, and the careful walk of a creature who knows exactly which monks will tolerate it and which will quote authorities. Brother Elred stiffens. There, you see. I see a cat, says Martin. You see the outer garment of ambiguity. Martin glances at you. He's been awake since matins. Elred ignores him. There are writings, traveller, that warn of beasts used by wicked persons, forms taken in darkness, companions of those who mutter over herbs and knots, cats go where called and come when not called. That alone is troubling. The grey cat sits, raises one hind leg, and begins washing itself with spectacular indifference to theology. Brother Martin smiles, and yet without them the grain suffers, the manuscripts suffer. Mice chew parchment as readily as cheese. Last winter one ate the corner of a sermon on humility, which was either tragedy or commentary. You sip your ale to hide a smile. The guest-house fire pops softly. Outside, the bells finish their final trembling note, leaving the air clean and hollow. Elred lowers himself onto the bench opposite you. Useful things may still be perilous. Fire cooks pottage and burns houses. Iron makes ploughshares and blades. A cat may catch mice and still belong too easily to night. Brother Martin reaches down and scratches the grey cat between the ears. The animal accepts this tribute without gratitude, or, Martin says, it may belong to the kitchen. The narrow monk's eyes move toward the passage, where shelves of manuscripts lie somewhere beyond walls and locked doors. In the scriptorium yesterday, this same creature sat upon a page of St. Gregory while I prepared ink. It looked at me as if it understood the Latin. Perhaps it objected to your abbreviation. No beast understands Latin. Many novices do not either, and we still feed them. The warmth of the room deepens around you. Their argument is not fierce, only worn smooth by repetition, like a stone step crossed many times. You begin to understand that even among learned men, cats sit uneasily between categories. They are household creatures, yet not obedient. They are hunters, yet silent. They love warmth, yet vanish into cold darkness. They save the grain, yet stare too long at corners, in a world arranged by signs, symbols, sermons, and warnings. Such independence invites interpretation. The grey cat leaves Brother Martin's hand, leaps onto the windowsill and looks out toward the cloister. Frost brightens beyond the glass. Somewhere deeper in the monastery, a scribe scrapes a knife gently across parchment, correcting a word before it dries into permanence. The sound is small, patient, and oddly comforting. Brother Aelred watches the cat. Some swear that a cat may carry whispers between a witch and the devil. Brother Martin sighs. Some swear that eels grow from mud, that mandrake roots scream, and that sleeping with a piece of cheese under the pillow brings dreams of one's future husband. Does it? It brings mice, Martin says. The dog under your bench thumps his tail once, perhaps in approval. You remain in the guest house through the pale morning, listening as the monks speak of old bestiaries, kitchen stores, and shadows seen at the edge of candlelight. No one solves the matter. No one truly expects to. The cat on the sill closes its eyes, wrapped in the clean grey light of dawn, while learned men weigh its soul against its usefulness and find the scales forever shifting. And as you warm your hands beside the monastery fire, you think of the black cat from the inn, the woman at the gate crossing herself, old Nan shelling peas into her bowl, and the way fear follows a creature that refuses to explain itself. Outside, the town begins to stir under the bells. Inside, ink dries on parchment. Bread waits on the board, and a suspicious monk keeps one eye on a sleeping cat, as if evil, should it arrive, might first pause to wash its paws. When you leave the monastery guest house, the morning has opened into a pale, grey market day, the sort of day that seems unsure whether it wishes to rain, snow, or merely make everyone discuss both. Brother Martin walks with you as far as the outer gate, his sleeves folded carefully away from the damp stone, while Brother Aelred remains behind in the passage, watching the grey cat on the windowsill as if he expects it to confess in Latin. The tawny-eared dog trots at your heel with renewed purpose, having discovered that monasteries provide crumbs if one looks spiritually hungry enough. The lay brother unbars the gate, and the town's noise spills in softly at first, then fully wheels over stones, voices under awnings, bells from the church tower, a goose protesting its immediate future, and the steady clack of wooden pattens as women cross the mud without giving their skirts entirely to it. The air smells of damp wool, wood smoke, river mist, frying onions, old straw, and fish laid out on boards with the serious expression fish always wear after having lost an argument with a net. Brother Martin pauses beside you. "Mind the market," he says. "It teaches more theology before noon than most sermons manage in a season." "About cats, you ask?" "About fear," he says. Then, after a moment, and about the price of herrings, which is often the same matter, he leaves you there with a small smile and returns through the monastery gate, where the hinges groan shut behind him. You stand a while in the lane, letting the town gather you back into itself. After the measured hush of the cloister, the market feels almost wild, though not in any grand or violent way. It is the wildness of daily need. Everyone has come to buy, sell, haggle, gossip, complain of tolls, praise saints, suspect neighbours, and touch every loaf of bread before choosing the one they first touched anyway. You walk toward the square, following the bell and the smell of hot griddle cakes. The same broken cartwheel still leans near the ditch by the gate, glazed with frost and mud, and the black cat from yesterday is nowhere to be seen. Its absence does not reduce its presence. If anything, the town seems full of places where it might appear beneath a stall, behind a barrel, along the churchyard wall, inside the shadow between two stacked crates. A creature becomes more powerful when people imagine it waiting. The square is crowded under a low sky. Stalls cluster around the well and along the church steps, their canvas awnings sagging with moisture. Merchants call their wares in voices polished by repetition. A baker slaps coarse loaves onto a board. A fishwife arranges smoke deals in loops like dark bracelets. A potter sells jugs with thumb marks still visible in the clay. A peddler displays ribbons, horn combs, pewter buttons, and tiny pilgrim badges stamped with the images of St. James with his shell, St. Thomas, St. Catherine, and her wheel small tokens for travellers who wish to prove where they have been, or at least where they have convincingly claimed to have been. Near the well, a woman sells bundles of herbs from a wicker tray sage, rue, rosemary, mugwort, betony, and little twists of lavender tied with thread. She tells one customer that rue keeps away bad air. She tells another that mugwort under the pillow brings clear dreams. To a nervous young man she offers a charm against toothache, which appears to be a written prayer folded around a clove and bound with red thread. No one can quite agree whether such charms work because of the saint invoked. The words written, the herb enclosed, or the price paid. Still, the young man buys it. Toothache is a great enemy of skepticism. You edge past a stall of cheese and butter, where 3 women stand with baskets over their arms, discussing a matter of high importance in hushed voices. You do not mean to listen, which is to say you listen in the ordinary medieval manner, openly but with your eyes aimed elsewhere. "It was curdled before dawn," says the first woman. "Milk turns," says the second. "Not like this, thick as bad glue." The third leans closer. Was the cat near it? The first woman presses her lips together at the threshold, sitting there, looking. "As cats do," says the second, though with less confidence than before. "As witches send them to do," says the third. The herb seller, overhearing, clicks her tongue. "Set an iron knife by the churn, and make the sign of the cross before you salt the butter. That helps." "It cannot hurt," says the herb seller, which is perhaps the oldest medical theory in the world. You continue on, warmed by a cup of thin ale bought from a boy whose hands are red with cold. The ale is sour, weak, and blessedly liquid. Beside the ale stall hangs a little board listing market tolls: so much for a cart, so much for a pack animal, so much for setting up a stall, so much for selling cloth, fish, or salt. A man in a dark cap moves through the crowd, collecting fees with the leather purse and the cheerful expression of someone legally disliked. Even commerce has its bells and rituals here. Pay the toll, weigh the wool, swear the oath, show the measure, curse the measure, then buy anyway, because winter is not interested in your principles. At the edge of the church steps, a scribe sits behind a small table with quills, inkhorn, sandshaker, and scraps of parchment. For a coin, he writes letters for those who cannot, records debts, copies, prayers, and draws little signs on folded slips to be carried against fever or misfortune. His fingers are stained black and brown, and his nose drips in the cold. He pauses to sharpen his quill with a knife no larger than a beetle. A woman in a patched blue cloak approaches him with a worried glance over her shoulder. "Can you write something?" she asks, against a cat crossing a birthing room. The scribe blinks, against the cat itself, or against harm. She considers this distinction seriously. Both, if the price is fair. He sighs, but not unkindly. "I can write a prayer to St. Margaret for safe birth. I cannot write a command that a cat will obey." "Then write it very strongly." You move on before your smile becomes noticeable. The dog at your side noses beneath a table, then retreats with the wounded dignity of one who has met a broom. Market dogs live by courage, speed, and the ability to look starving while chewing something. At a nearby stall, an old man sells charms made from lead, bone, thread, and small bits of polished jet. Among them are little bells for children's caps, meant to frighten away spirits or, at the very least, alert everyone when the child is attempting to fall into a ditch. He also sells tiny packets of salt, for thresholds, he tells a customer, for cradles, for churns, for any place where luck leaks. "Does luck leak?" asks a girl beside him. "Everything leaks," he says, eyeing the sky, especially roofs. The clouds finally decide on rain. It begins as a thin mist, hardly falling, more like the air remembering water. Hoods rise, shoulders hunch, the market does not stop. A bell rings from the church tower again, dull and grey above the square. Its sound passes over the stalls, over the awnings, over the fish, herbs, bread, charms, and all the small fears laid out for sale beside the cabbages. Then the black cat appears. Not dramatically, no thunder, no screaming. It slips from behind the butter stall, tail lifted, paws neat despite the mud. The women who had spoken of curdled milk fall silent. The cat steps between a basket of leeks and a crate of hens. The hens erupt into soft, offended clucking, though hens object to nearly everything, and are not reliable witnesses. A boy points. A man carrying a sack of grain changes direction so suddenly that he collides with the ale cellar, splashing sour ale over both their shoes. The cat crosses the path of an elderly widow in a brown cloak. She stops. The market watches, not all at once, but in little ripples. Those nearest look first, then those behind them look because others are looking, then the people farther off pretend not to look while doing nothing else. The widow does not step back. She does not spit, cross herself, or mutter a charm. She simply adjusts the basket on her arm and waits for the cat to finish its crossing. Someone whispers, "Bad luck." The widow turns her head. At my age, luck is mostly remembering where I put my knife. A few laughs escape, quickly softened by rain. The cat reaches the church steps, sits beneath the scribe's table, and begins to wash one paw. The scribe looks down at it, then at the woman who wanted a strong prayer against cats in birthing rooms. "I can add a line," he says. The woman nods. Add 2. You stand near the well with rain beading on your cloak, watching the square return slowly to motion. It is strange how lightly the moment passes and how deeply it settles. Nothing happens. No cart overturns. No milk leaps from a pail. No saint cracks from the church wall. Yet everyone will remember that the cat crossed the widow's path, and by nightfall the story may have grown a second tale. Perhaps the widow will lose a coin. Perhaps a hen will stop laying. Perhaps the rain will become someone's proof. In a town where hunger waits at the edge of winter, meaning is gathered like firewood. People pick up any sign that might warm them, or warn them, or tell them whom to blame when the cold gets in. You buy a heel of bread and a strip of smoked fish, then share the smallest corner with the dog, who accepts it as though granting you a favour. The bells fade. The rain softens. Under the scribe's table, the cat closes its eyes, guardian of nothing, accused of everything, perfectly content beside the ink and mud of market day. By midday, the rain has worked its way into everything soft. It beads along your hood, darkens your cloak, settles into the seams of your boots, and makes the smoked fish in your hand seem less like food and more like something the river has reconsidered. The market continues in damp determination behind you, but its noise grows muffled as you turn from the square into a side lane, following the smell of warm ale, singed onions, and wet bodies seeking shelter. The torn-eared dog follows close, carrying his bit of fish with grave concentration, as if bearing an offering to a minor shrine dedicated to appetite. The lane dips toward a row of low houses leaning beneath their thatch. Rain trickles from eaves in silver strings. A cooper hammers hoops onto a barrel under a shelter of patched canvas. A laundress wrings cloth with hands red from cold water, pausing now and then to glance toward the market as though gossip might arrive faster than customers. Near a doorway, a child draws shapes in the mud with a stick across, a wheel, something that may be a horse if charity is applied. Beside the child sits a grey hen, puffed against the rain and looking personally betrayed by weather, mankind, and perhaps God's wider arrangements. The alehouse stands at the corner where the lane bends toward the tanner's ditch, which is unfortunate for the nose but convenient for those who wish to drink before noticing. A faded sign hangs above the door, painted with a red cup and a fish so poorly rendered it might be a sermon against pride. Inside, voices murmur low and thick. You duck beneath the lintel and step into a room darker than the inn, narrower and warmer in the way crowded places are warm from breath, bodies, smoke, and a hearth that has given up on beauty and settled for usefulness. A rush-covered floor yields under your boots with soft, damp crackles. The beams are soot black, The benches are polished by generations of elbows, quarrels, and men pretending they are not listening. Clay cups hang from pegs. A barrel stands near the wall with a wooden tap in its belly. Above it, someone has nailed a small horseshoe and a sprig of dried rowan, tied together with red thread, because alehouses attract both thirst and trouble, and it is wise to discourage at least one of them. The keeper is a square woman with rolled sleeve and forearms strong enough to knead bread, lift barrels, and end foolishness. She looks you over, then the dog, then the mud falling from both of you. Dog stays under the bench, she says. The dog, hearing tone if not language, immediately crawls under the nearest bench with the humility of a monk before a bishop. You pay for a cup of ale and a place near the hearth. The ale is brown, cloudy, and sour enough to remind you that modern people complain far too easily about beverages, yet it warms the throat, and warmth is persuasive. You sit beside a man with a leather apron, a woman mending a sleeve, and a narrow fellow whose hat is patched in 3 places and whose eyes are quick enough to count crumbs before they fall. The narrow fellow has a sack at his feet. Something inside it shifts. You try not to look, which makes you look more carefully. Rats, he says, noticing dead ones, mostly. The mending woman sighs. That is Osric. He brings his work indoors so everyone may admire it. Osric gives a little bow from his bench. The town employs me to reduce the rat population. I provide evidence. Evidence has a scent. Great offices often do. The leather-aproned man leans away from the sack. Your evidence leaks. Truth often does, says Osric. This, you learn, is the rat man, though no one calls him that warmly. He lives somewhere near the ditch, sets traps in storehouses, cellars, stables, and bakehouses, and is paid in coin when the town remembers, scraps when it does not, and insults consistently. His tools lie beside him: a wooden club, a coil of cord, a little cage trap, and a pouch of bait that smells powerfully of old cheese and spiritual decline. In a town of grain bins, cheese shelves, straw mattresses, and walls full of gaps, his work matters. So does the work of cats. This appears to irritate him. As if summoned by professional rivalry, a cat leaps onto the alehouse windowsill. Not your black cat from the gate, not the monastery's grey judge. This one is a brindled brown and black creature with white socks, torn whiskers, and a round belly suggesting regular success. It crouches against the cloudy light, rain shining on its back. The room barely reacts at first. Alehouse creatures are granted more freedom than church creatures, but then the cat drops lightly to the floor, pads past the benches, and slips behind the barrel where the wall meets the hearthstones. Osric sniffs. There, Mistress Malkin's little prince. The alewife points a ladle at him. That cat has caught more rats in this room than you have caught sermons in church. I do not charge the church. The church would not pay you either. A few drinkers chuckle into their cups. The cat, having received praise and insult with equal disdain, disappears beneath a low cupboard. A heartbeat later there is a scuffle, a squeak, and the thump of something small meeting its final theological uncertainty. The dog under your bench raises his head. Osric's sack shifts again, perhaps in sympathy. The alewife folds her arms. You see, Osric takes a thoughtful drink. I see a beast that hunts at night, creeps through walls, sleeps beside fires, and answers to no Christian name. It answers to Malkin, says the mending woman. It ignores Malkin, says Osric. Which is worse? A dog may be called, a horse may be bridled, a cow may be milked, though with much negotiation. A cat takes service but gives no oath. The leather-aproned man nods as if this is a serious legal matter. There is something in that. There is something in everything when one is paid by the rat, says the alewife. Still, Osric's words linger. In this world, almost everyone belongs somewhere, to someone, under some rule. The villain owes labour to the manor, the apprentice owes obedience to the master, the monk owes hours to the bell, the wife, the servant, the baker, the reeve, the ploughman, the shepherd. Each is bound in visible cords of duty, custom, need, and law. Even animals fit into human arrangements. Oxen pull, hens lay, sheep become wool with legs, dogs guard, herd, follow, beg, and look ashamed when scolded. Cats alone seem to live beside the household without entering its moral paperwork. No one can quite agree whether this makes them wise, wicked, or merely excellent at avoiding paperwork. The brindled cat emerges from beneath the cupboard with a rat held neatly in its jaws. It is larger than the mouse from the inn, sleek with theft and cellar darkness. A murmur passes through the room. Not disgust exactly. Medieval people do not faint easily at the sight of useful unpleasantness. More like respect mixed with reluctance. The cat carries the rat to the hearth and lays it near the stones, where everyone may inspect the argument. The alewife gives a satisfied nod. There, rent paid. Osric leans forward, or tribute brought. Tribute to whom? He lowers his voice, and because he lowers it, everyone listens. That is one of the first laws of gossip. My cousin in Wexford swore there was a woman who sent her cat through keyholes. It would go by night, sit upon a man's chest, drink the cream from his breath, and return before dawn fat as a priest at Easter. The mending woman looks up. Cream from breath. His words, Osric says. Your cousin was a fool. Many true things are first reported by fools. The alewife snorts, and many foolish things improve by travel. You smile into your cup. The ale has begun to seem almost good, which may be its strongest warning. Around you, the room leans into the tale. Osric continues with grave pleasure, describing cats that attend witches' sabbaths. Cats that vanish when struck but leave bruises on old women. Cats that know the names of unbaptized children. Cats that leap across corpses and disturb the soul's rest. Some swear such things happened in this village or that one, beyond the hill, over the river, always close enough to unsettle and far enough to avoid verification. The alewife listens while wiping cups with a cloth that spreads moisture more evenly across them. At last she says, and yet when rats get into your flour, who do you call? Osric sits back. Me. After that. The cat. Exactly. The room laughs more fully now, and even Osric accepts it with a thin smile. But the laughter does not erase the fear, it only sets it down gently beside the fire. You can feel how easily usefulness and dread share a bowl here. Rats bring ruin. They spoil grain, chew leather, gnaw candles, and leave droppings where bread should be clean. They breed in walls and hay, come silent through thatch, and turn winter stores into famine one small bite at a time. A cat is a blessing against them. Yet a blessing that appears from darkness, works without orders, and returns with blood on its whiskers becomes a strange sort of blessing. The kind that makes people grateful with one hand and sign themselves with the other. A young servant from a nearby bakehouse enters, cheeks flushed from rain and oven heat. She carries a wrapped loaf and speaks breathlessly to the alewife. They say Mistress Ellen's milk turned again. She swears it is the black cat from the market. Milk turns because cows are spiteful, says the leather-aproned man. Or because bowls are not scalded, the alewife adds. Tell Ellen to wash her pans with boiling water before she accuses anything with fur. The servant lowers her voice. She says the cat looked at her. The alewife glances toward the brindled hunter, now licking one paw beside the rat. Most creatures with eyes will do that. Even so, the servant makes the sign of the cross before taking a cup of ale. You cannot blame her. The rain taps at the shutters. The hearth shifts. Shadows gather beneath stools and along the wall. In such half-light, reason and rumour sit close enough to share warmth. A cat's look becomes intention. A spoiled pail becomes malice. A sickness. A failed loaf. A child's cough. A bad dream each seeks a shape, and a silent animal passing by moonlight is a shape ready-made. You finish your ale slowly. The dog under your bench sleeps again. Osric ties his sack tighter and promises the alewife he will clear the cellar next week if she has coin. She promises him coin if he clears it properly and does not leave little memorials beneath the stairs. The brindled cat curls near the hearth, untroubled by contracts, cousins, legends, or municipal pest control. As the rain deepens outside, you remain in the low alehouse, listening to the soft scrape of cups, the mutter of market news, the hiss of damp wood in the fire. No one has decided whether the cat protects the town or invites worse things inside. Perhaps both thoughts are useful. Perhaps both keep people alert in a world where food is fragile, walls are thin, and night enters wherever it can find a crack. The brindled cat opens one yellow eye, watches the room for a long, unreadable moment, then closes it again as if the verdict can wait. By the time you step out of the alehouse, the rain has become less a weather event than a patient occupation. It falls in fine, cold threads from a sky the colour of old pewter, stitching every roof, cart, cloak, and shutter into the same damp tapestry. Behind you, the alehouse door closes on warmth, voices, rat tails, and the brindled cat curled near the hearth with the moral serenity of a bishop who's already eaten. Ahead, the lane gleams with mud, and the market square blurs behind veils of mist and wood smoke. The tawny-eared dog emerges from beneath the bench of the world and shakes himself violently, spraying water in a generous circle. A passing boy yelps and calls him several names that would disappoint a parish priest. The dog, having cleansed himself and wounded diplomacy, trots back to your side as if nothing has happened. You pull your hood low and take the north road out of town, because the gatekeeper told you there is a pilgrim track beyond the fields and a roadside shrine a mile past the mill. Travellers sometimes shelter there when the rain turns cruel, and though shelter in these parts may mean 3 stones, a roof, and a theological suggestion, it still sounds better than standing in the lane until you become part of it. You pass beneath the town gate once more, where the iron portcullis hangs above like a set of giant teeth too tired to bite. The gatekeeper is there again, hunched in his fur-lined cap, marking goods on a wax tablet with the solemnity of a man recording the sins of onions. He sees you leaving and lifts his chin. Road's foul. So was the ale. Then you are prepared. Outside the walls, the world opens into fields stripped by winter. Furrows hold water in long, dull lines. Stubble bristles through the wet ground. Crows stand in the distance, black knots on grey cloth, pecking at whatever the season has forgotten. The road is not so much a road as a remembered agreement between carts, hooves, and feet. It curves past a ditch, over a hump of frozen earth, then down toward a cluster of willows beside the mill stream. The mill wheel turns slowly, groaning in the rain, lifting and dropping water with the weary rhythm of someone too polite to stop working. You pass cottages set back from the road. Their walls wattle and daub, their thatch dark and dripping. Smoke leaks through roof holes and beneath eaves. At each doorway, small defences against misfortune announce themselves quietly. A horseshoe nailed above a lintel, a cross scratched into the wood, a twist of rowan tied with red thread, a bunch of dried herbs hanging beside the door, perhaps vervain, perhaps mugwort, perhaps simply weeds promoted by hope, at one cottage. An old iron key hangs from a peg near the threshold, not for locking anything, but for warding off harm. Iron is stubborn, people say. Spirits dislike it, witches dislike it, elves dislike it. No one can quite agree whether iron frightens unseen things because it is holy, ancient, heavy, or merely cold enough to discourage visitors. Near another door, you notice a shallow bowl of milk set beneath the eaves. Rain has thinned it to cloudy water. A woman in a patched cloak sees you looking and calls from the doorway, "For the house cat." Does the cat drink it, you ask? When it chooses. And if it does not, then the little folk may have it, she says, and closes the door before either of you must decide whether this is a joke. You walk on, smiling faintly into the rain. Here, belief is not always a banner raised high. More often, it is a bowl left under an eave, a knife beneath a cradle, salt at the threshold, a whispered prayer at dusk. People do what their mothers did, and their mothers did what someone older swore once helped. In a world where fever comes quickly, harvests fail quietly, and officials arrive loudly, a small charm feels like something a person can hold. The dog trots ahead, then stops beside the track and sniffs a clump of nettles with deep professional seriousness. Beyond him, a narrow path climbs toward the roadside shrine. You see it first as a blur of stone beneath an elder tree, a little structure no taller than a man, with a sloped roof of weathered boards and a niche holding a painted figure of the Virgin, her blue cloak faded almost grey. Someone has tucked fresh rushes at the base, though they are now soaked flat. A few pilgrim badges hang from a nail nearby, offerings left by travellers who passed safely, or wished very much to do so. A strip of cloth is tied to a branch above, snapping weakly in the rain. Beside the shrine stands a woman with a pack on her back and a staff in one hand. Her cloak is patched at the shoulders, and a scallop shell badge is sewn to her hat, marking her as a pilgrim or at least a person with excellent taste in symbolic headwear. She is not alone. Two men crouch near a small struggling fire under the shrine's roof, feeding it twigs dry enough to smoke but too damp to burn with confidence. One has a rosary wound around his wrist. The other wears a little lead badge of St. Christopher pinned to his chest, the patron of travellers, useful for roads, rivers, and moments when the bridge looks personally offended by your existence. They shift to make room as you approach. No one asks many questions. Rain creates fellowship faster than good manners. You duck under the little roof, and for a moment the absence of falling water feels like luxury. The fire smoulders more than burns, but it gives a shy warmth. The dog squeezes in beside your legs, lowers himself with a sigh, and looks at everyone as if he arranged this shelter personally. One of the men shares a crust of coarse bread, which you accept with gratitude and chew slowly. It has the texture of a thoughtful wall. The woman pilgrim notices the dog and smiles. Better company than some men on the road. The man with the rosary says, "Dogs bark at danger." The other man adds, "Cats invite it." The woman gives him a look. "Cats catch mice." "They catch more than mice," he says. "My sister's neighbour swore a black cat sat on the sill 3 nights before her cow's milk dried." "Cows dry for many reasons," she says. "Age, feed, winter, poor milking." "And cats," he says, with the calm force of someone who prefers his explanations portable. The rain thickens beyond the shrine, turning the fields to a watercolour of brown, grey, and pale straw. You warm your fingers over the weak fire and listen as the old subject returns, as if cats themselves have padded along the road and slipped beneath the shelter. The pilgrims speak of villages where people nail charms above byre doors to protect cattle. They speak of iron horseshoes, hazel twigs, blessed candles saved from Candlemas, and little crosses drawn in ash on the foreheads of lambs. Some swear that if a cat leaps over a corpse, the dead soul cannot rest until prayers are said again. Others say that is nonsense, but still they keep cats from the room where a body lies, because grief is not the moment to test theories. The woman pilgrim unwraps a bit of cheese and cuts it with a small knife. She offers you a shaving, then gives one to the dog, who accepts it with reverent speed. In my aunt's house, she says, they kept a black cat for 17 years, best mouser in the parish, slept by the hearth, never harmed anyone. The rosary man nods slowly. Perhaps not all. Perhaps not any, she says. The second man shakes his head. You did not see the one in our lane. It would come at moonrise and sit by the well. No sound, no blinking. Then children took fevers. Children take fevers, she says, softer now. He looks down. Aye, they do. The fire gives a little collapse inward, sparks hiding under damp ash. For a moment no one speaks. You feel how the road has gathered not merely travellers but their losses, tucked inside cloaks beside bread, charms, and spare laces. When people say a cat brought fever, perhaps they mean fever came and left them nothing to argue with. A cat, at least, has a shape. A person may shout at it, chase it, cross themselves after it. You cannot chase winter sickness from a cradle with a broom, though many must have tried in their hearts. After a while, the woman pilgrim reaches into her pack and brings out a small wax candle wrapped in cloth. Blessed at Candlemas, she says. My mother made me carry it. The man with the rosary smiles. Mothers trust candles more than sons. With reason, she says. She lights it from the smoking fire and sets it in the shrine niche before the faded Virgin. The flame stands tiny and gold against the damp dimness. Around it, the painted face seems almost alive, though perhaps that is only the wavering light. Rain taps on the wooden roof. The dog breathes against your boot. Somewhere in the hedgerow, hidden by rain, a bird gives one sharp note and falls silent. You notice, then, at the edge of the shrine roof, small paw prints in the mud. Cat prints, neat, delicate, already filling with the rain. The second man sees them too and stiffens. There. The woman pilgrim looks. A cat passed, or a small fox, or your fear-wearing slippers. The rosary man gives a tired chuckle. The second man does not, but he does not leave either. The shrine, the candle, the rain, and the company hold him in place. As afternoon leans toward evening, you rise with the others. The road ahead glistens dark and uncertain. You tie your cloak tighter, check the little bread left in your pouch, and glance back at the candle glowing in the niche. The charms on the doors, the horseshoes, the rowan, the salt, the blessed wax, the whispered prayers none can command the night to be gentle. Yet they give people something to do while the night comes on. You step away from the shrine into freezing rain, the dog at your heel and the faint smell of smoke clinging to your cloak. Behind you, the pilgrims gather their packs. Ahead, the muddy track bends between hedges toward open fields and whatever roofs will take you in before dark. And somewhere near the road, unseen but easy to imagine, a cat moves silently beneath the dripping thorns, neither devil nor saint, only a shadow with paws, carrying the weight of every story placed upon its back. The road from the shrine runs low between hedges silvered with rain, then climbs by slow, stubborn inches toward a scatter of fields and bare orchards. You walk with your hood drawn close, feeling the damp creep through wool and into the patient places between your shoulders. The pilgrim woman and the two men remain behind for a while, gathering their packs beneath the little shrine roof, their voices softened by distance until they become part of the rain itself. The Candlemas flame still glows faintly in the niche when you look back, a tiny gold eye watching the road. Then the bend takes it away. The torn-eared dog keeps near your left boot. He has accepted hardship with the grave resignation of a creature who suspects supper exists somewhere ahead and is willing to support you emotionally until you find it. Now and then he stops to investigate a hedge root, a puddle, or a tuft of grass with the intensity of a scholar decoding a royal charter. You envy him a little. The dog's world is rich in news, all written in mud. Beyond the hedges, the countryside opens into a manor's lands. Strips of ploughed field lie dark and wet under the grey sky, divided by low ridges and narrow paths. Here and there, winter wheat shows in green blades, fragile as threads. A few peasants work near the far end of a field, bent under cloaks, repairing a hurdle fence and leading a pair of patient oxen whose breath rises like pale smoke. The oxen move as if they have known since birth that the world is heavy and must be dragged anyway. Near a ditch, a boy scatters something from a basket, perhaps chaff, perhaps spoiled grain, perhaps hope in a practical form, while crows wait at a respectful legal distance. You pass a little wayside cross, its stone softened by moss, then follow the track toward a cluster of cottages huddled beneath leafless trees. Smoke rises from their roofs, flattened by the damp air. A woman in a brown cloak drives geese toward a pond with a willow switch. The geese ignore her in perfect unity. Their honking rolls across the field like a committee objecting to reform. Near one cottage door, a string of onions hangs beneath the thatch. Beside another, a bunch of dried herbs swings from a peg, and below it, scratched into the wood, you notice 3 small crosses. The habit is old mark the threshold, mark the churn, mark the buyer, mark whatever edge misfortune may choose for entering. At the centre of the settlement stands the manor hall, not a grand castle, but a long timber building raised on stone footings, with a steep roof, shuttered windows, and a yard churned to brown paste by hooves and boots. A small dovecote rises beyond it on a post, the lord's birds cooing in their privileged little house. Near the gate, a reeve's staff leans against the wall. Beside it hangs a board used for notices, tolls, and reminders that the lord's patience, like his pasture, has boundaries. A bell rings from a smaller chapel near the hall, not the deep town bell or the measured monastery bell, but a thinner sound, local and work-worn. People begin drifting toward the hall yard, men in patched hoods, women with baskets, an old shepherd wrapped in a sheepskin. 2 boys dragging their feet because manor courts are among the few entertainments worse than chores. You stand near the edge of the yard, uncertain whether to enter, until a broad man with a red scarf around his neck notices you. "Traveller," he asks. "Yes." "Then stand where you like and speak when spoken to. If you owe no rent here, you are already blessed." This is the reeve. You gather, a man placed between lord and village, beloved by neither side in the careful manner of useful officials. He carries a tally stick tucked into his belt, notched with debts and dues. At his shoulder walks a clerk with a wax tablet, ink horn, and the look of someone who believes spelling is a weapon. The clerk's fingers are stained nearly black. His nose is red from cold. He glances at your dog, whose hound His own, mostly, you say. The reeve accepts this as one accepts rain, not ideal, but too common to contest. Inside the manor hall, the air is warmer but thick with the smell of damp wool, rushes, smoke, and the sour ghost of last night's ale. The floor is strewn with old rushes that have been refreshed near the high table, but remain philosophically unchanged near the door. A fire burns in the central hearth, its smoke rising into the rafters and escaping through a roof vent whenever it feels cooperative. Benches have been set along the sides, and people settle onto them with sighs, coughs, and the cautious arrangement of knees. At one end, beneath a hanging cloth faded with the Lord's badge, sits the steward, a narrow man with a fur collar and eyelids heavy enough to suggest he has already heard every complaint in creation. The manor court begins with matters of land and custom. A man is fined for letting pigs root where they should not. Another insists the pigs belong to his cousin, which impresses no one, least of all the pig's apparent cousin. Two women dispute a strip of garden near a fence. A tenant owes 2 days of labour repairing the mill leat. Someone has cut wood from the Lord's copse without permission. Someone else's goat has entered a bean patch and behaved like a goat, which is to say, without shame or legal counsel. The clerk scratches notes into his tablet. The steward listens, asks questions, and occasionally closes his eyes in a way that might be thought prayer or despair. The villagers wait their turns, murmuring under breath, stamping cold from their feet. In such a place, daily life becomes visible as a web of obligations hens owed at Martinmas, grain measured after harvest, fines for straying animals, rights to gather fallen wood, rules for grazing, rules for brewing, rules for being alive on land that belongs to someone whose boots are probably drier than yours. Then an old woman rises with a covered crock in her hands. A quiet travels through the hall, not silence exactly, but attention sharpening. The reeve frowns. Agnes Miller, bring your matter. Agnes steps forward. She is small, wrapped in a grey shawl, with cheeks hollowed by age and winter. Her hands are knotted, but steady. She sets the crock before the steward and removes the cloth. A sour smell rises from it, thick and unpleasant. Butter, or what butter had hoped to become before misfortune intervened. My churn spoiled, she says, 3rd time since St. Clement's. The steward leans back slightly. Milk spoils. Not after I scald the churn, salt the rim, and say the prayer my mother taught me. The clerk looks up. What prayer? Agnes's chin lifts, a decent one. Several villagers nod as if this answers the matter completely. The steward sighs. Whom do you accuse? Agnes turns, and the hall shifts with her gaze. Near the bench by the wall sits a thin girl of perhaps 15, her hair tucked under a linen coif, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Beside her, wrapped in a patched cloak, is a woman you have not seen before, pale and sharp-faced, with a basket of mending at her feet. At the woman's hem, half hidden in shadow, sits a small dark cat. Not fully black like the gate cat, but nearly so, with a white blaze at the throat no larger than a dropped crumb. The hall inhales. That cat, Agnes says. It sits by my byre. It looks through my dairy window. My butter will not come. My hens lay soft eggs. And last night I dreamt my dead sister called from the well. The steward presses 2 fingers to his brow. Agnes! I do not accuse without cause. The pale woman stands slowly. It is my daughter's cat. It catches mice. It catches luck, says Agnes. Someone near the door murmurs agreement. Another person mutters that the cat has been seen near the hen house. A third says all cats are seen near hen houses because hens are foolish and feed attracts mice. This reasonable point is swallowed immediately by a larger murmur, for reason in a crowded hall must often shout, and it is too polite to do so. The girl reaches down and draws the cat closer. The animal presses against her skirt, eyes wide, ears angled back. It looks less like an agent of evil than a creature regretting its attendance at court. The reeve raises his staff and thumps it once. Quiet. The dog at your feet startles, then sits very straight, as if hoping not to be fined. The steward turns to Agnes. Have your hens been ill? They lay soft eggs. Have they had shell grit? Agnes hesitates. They have what hens have. A man at the back says, Mine lay soft when the winter feed is poor. Agnes snaps, Your hens are lazy. The hall enjoys this more than it should. The steward looks to the pale woman. Marjorie, has your cat entered Agnes's dairy? Not that I know. Does it roam? It is a cat. A murmur, half laughter and half disapproval, moves through the benches. There is the difficulty in a single sentence. It is a cat. It roams because roaming is woven into its bones. It belongs to a house without accepting the house as a border. It catches mice in one yard, sleeps in another, crosses a third at moonrise, and returns with secrets no one can verify. In a village where every person's labour can be summoned, weighed, fined, and written into a clerk's wax, such freedom feels almost insolent. Agnes points at the cat. My grandson woke crying after it crossed our threshold. Children wake crying, Marjorie says. He said he saw yellow eyes. There are yellow eyes in every byre from rats, owls, and hungry men with lanterns, says the old shepherd, and earns a few low chuckles. Agnes turns on him. You laugh because your sheep are not cursed. My sheep do not need cursing, he says. They manage foolishness alone. Even the steward's mouth twitches. Yet the matter does not dissolve. The clerk writes something. The cat's tail curls around the girl's wrist. The girl stares at the rushes as if she might disappear into them if she looks hard enough. You feel the old pattern tightening, not with grand cruelty, but with ordinary fear, spoiled butter, sick hens, strange dreams, a child crying, a cat seen too often where trouble already waits. Some swear that misfortune clings to certain animals, certain women, certain thresholds, certain nights. Others say misfortune merely comes, and people, being human, put a collar on it after the fact. The steward asks whether anyone saw the cat touch the churn. No one did. Whether anyone saw Marjorie charm the dairy. No one did, though one woman says she heard singing. I was singing to keep time while washing linen, Marjorie says. What song? Asked the clerk, too quickly. Marjorie gives him a flat look, a dull one. You would like it. A laugh breaks the tension, small but useful. The steward lets it pass, then lifts his hand. Agnes Miller will scald her churn again with water properly boiled. The reeve will see that shell grit is given for the hens. Marjorie will keep the cat indoors for 3 nights. Marjorie's eyebrows rise. Have you ever kept a cat indoors for 3 nights? The steward pauses, then make a strong attempt. This apparently is the full power of local law against feline uncertainty. Agnes is not satisfied, but she gathers her crock. Marjorie sits, the girl exhales, and the dark cat tucks its paws beneath itself with the weary dignity of one unjustly involved in dairy administration. The court moves on to a dispute about a missing rake, which lacks both supernatural depth and narrative grace. Yet the hall keeps glancing toward the girl's hem, toward the small dark animal, toward the crock of failed butter. The matter has been judged, but not ended. a court can settle fines. It cannot quiet every kitchen whisper. When the proceedings close, people rise into the late afternoon dimness. The steward withdraws. The clerk sands his notes. The reeve reminds two tenants about ditch work, ruining their exit. You step back into the yard, where the rain has weakened to mist and the sky hangs low over the fields. Marjorie and her daughter pass near you, the cat hidden now under the girl's cloak. For a moment, amber eyes peer from the fold of wool, then vanish. The girl catches your glance and says softly, "She only hunts mice." You nod. Most accusations begin by ignoring useful work. She gives a small smile, uncertain but grateful, then follows her mother toward the cottages. The dog nudges your hand. Somewhere in the yard, a hen clucks as if offering expert testimony too late. Beyond the manor hall, smoke rises from winter roofs, and the bell in the chapel gives one thin note for evening. You stand in the damp yard, thinking of the market, the alehouse, the shrine, and now this court of small fears. Evil, here, does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as curdled milk, a bad dream, a hen's weak shell, and a frightened village looking for a shape that fits. And tonight, as the mist gathers around the hedges, that shape has paws, whiskers, and a white mark at its throat. You leave the manor yard as evening begins its slow descent, not falling all at once, but gathering in the ditches, under the hedges, and beneath the eaves of cottages where smoke hangs low and blue. The thin chapel bell has stopped, yet its last note seems to remain inside the damp air, trembling faintly around the roofs and bare trees. Behind you, the hall empties by degrees. Villagers step into mud, pull hoods over hair, mutter over fines, and carry home the day's judgments like bundles of wet kindling. Agnes Miller goes one way with her sour crock hugged beneath her cloak. Marjorie and her daughter go another, the accused cat hidden carefully under wool, though you glimpse the small dark head once as it peers out with bright, offended eyes. The torn-eared dog trots beside you, then pauses to sniff a wagon rut where a wheel has sunk deep and left a brown pool reflecting the grey sky. You follow the path past the dovecote, along a fence of woven hazel, and toward the far edge of the manor lands, where a healer is said to live beyond the apple trees. It was the old shepherd who mentioned her as the court dispersed, leaning close enough that his sheepskin smelled of rain, lanolin, and long patience. "If you want to know why folk blame cats," he said, "ask Dame Isabel. She knows herbs, bones, births, fevers, and every foolishness people whisper after dark. Mind you, she will charge for the wisdom if she can. If not coin, then news." Now you walk in search of her cottage, boots sucking softly at the mud. On either side, the orchards stand leafless and crooked, their branches black against the fading light. A few last apples, shriveled and brown, cling high above like forgotten bells. Beneath one tree, someone has tied strips of cloth to a branch, little offerings for healing. Some swear that sickness can be knotted into rags and left for wind and saints to untangle. Others say it only decorates trees and alarms travellers. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such customs survive because they work, or because doing something feels warmer than doing nothing. The healer's cottage appears where the orchard meets a patch of rough woodland. It is small, low-roofed, and half hidden behind bundles of stacked firewood and drying poles now empty in winter. Smoke rises from the roof in a steady thread. A row of clay pots sits beneath the eaves, each covered with cloth and tied with string. The door is oak, old and dark, marked with a little cross cut by knife point above the latch. Beside it hangs a horseshoe, a twist of rowan, and, rather unexpectedly, the dried foot of a hare. The dog sniffs it and looks deeply uncertain. You knock. Inside, something clatters. A voice says, "If you've come about warts, I told Hobbs' wife to stop naming them after saints. Come in." You lift the latch and step into warmth scented so strongly with herbs that for a moment you feel you have walked into a garden dreaming of summer. Bundles hang from the rafters: sage, rosemary, thyme, mugwort, betony, yarrow, lavender, tansy, and plants you cannot name, all drying in rustling shadows above the fire. Clay jars line shelves along the wall. Beeswax candles burn in 2 iron holders, their light steady and golden. Near the hearth stands a stool, a work table, a kettle, a mortar and pestle, and a shallow bowl in which several leeches coil like living punctuation marks. Dame Isabel herself sits beside the table, grinding something green and damp with slow, firm movements. She is neither ancient nor young, wrapped in a dark gown and a patched apron, her hair hidden under a linen coif. Her eyes are quick, and her hands are the hands of someone who has soothed babies, set poultices, pulled splinters, washed wounds, counted coins, and lifted more grief than she speaks of. A blackened iron key hangs from her belt beside a small knife and a pouch of dried leaves. She looks at you, then at the dog. "That one has fleas," she says. The dog wags his tail, graciously accepting diagnosis. "Likely, you say. You too, by tomorrow, if you share blankets." Medieval hospitality has many forms. Some begin with warnings. You explain, as well as you can, that you passed through the manor court and heard the accusation against Marjorie's cat. Isabel listens without surprise. She pours hot water into a cup over crushed herbs and hands it to you. The brew smells sharp, bitter, and green, the sort of drink that makes the body believe it is being corrected. "Drink," she says. "You look damp enough to sprout moss." You drink. Your mouth immediately regrets trusting her, but your chest warms. Isabel returns to grinding, Agnes's butter spoiled. "Yes." Hence laying soft. "Yes." Dreams. A dead sister at the well. She nods as if these troubles are ingredients in a familiar stew. Winter feed poor. Churn not hot enough. No matter what she says, hens need shell, or old mortar scraped fine. Dreams come when people sleep cold, eat late, or carry guilt to bed. As for the cat, it was nearby because dairies attract mice. Mice come for grain. Cats come for mice. Fear comes for everything. The dog circles twice and settles near the hearth. You sit on the offered stool. It has only 3 legs and keeps its balance through some private miracle. On the table beside Isabel's mortar lie curious objects: a strip of linen stained with plant juice, a little packet of salt, a spindle whorl, dried berries, a charm written on parchment and folded tight, a small vial of oil, and a red thread threaded through a bead. Medicine and magic, prayer and household habit, all share the same space here without embarrassment. A person with fever may receive willow bark, a whispered psalm, and advice to keep away from night air. A cow refusing milk may be rubbed with warm ale, blessed at the brow, and fed better hay. A child with nightmares may be given lavender under the pillow, a cross marked over the bed, and, if the mother is desperate, a charm tied to the left wrist before moonrise. No one can quite agree whether one part cures, another comforts, and the third merely gives the hand something to do. Isabel seems content to let all 3 work if they can. She gestures toward the leech bowl. "Those are for Master Oswin's swollen leg. He says leeches are wicked little thieves until his pain eases. Then he calls them God's servants. Do they help? Sometimes. So does rest. But no one respects a remedy that costs nothing. A dry little laugh escapes you, and she allows herself a narrow smile. Outside, wind moves in the bare trees. Inside, the cottage glows softly. A pot simmers over the fire, releasing the smell of onions, garlic, and perhaps beans. On a low shelf, you notice little cloth bags labelled with marks rather than letters, one with 3 dots, one with a cross, one with a crescent cut into the fabric. Isabel follows your gaze. For those who cannot read, she says, dots for belly pains, cross for childbirth, crescent for sleep, though half the village ignores the marks and takes whichever smells least vile. And the charms, for those who ask, do you believe in them? She pauses, pestle held still. I believe fear can kill a person slowly. I believe comfort can keep breath in the body a little longer. I believe saints hear more kindly than judges. I believe boiled water cleans better than muttering. And I believe a mother who has lost 2 children should not be mocked for tying red thread to the 3rd. The room falls quiet except for the fire. Her answer settles gently, but firmly, like a blanket placed over something trembling. Then a sound comes from the rafters. A soft thump, a scrape. The dog lifts his head. A cat appears on one of the beams above you. This one is pale grey with darker stripes, broad-faced and heavy-pawed. It peers down through hanging herbs, tail swaying among the bundles of lavender. In the candlelight, half hidden by drying plants and smoke, it looks admittedly capable of attending secret meetings. Then it sneezes, startling itself so badly that it nearly loses its footing. Isabel sighs. That is Piers, mighty hunter of moths, enemy of gravity. The cat recovers dignity by pretending nothing happened. You look up at him and smile. Do people fear your cat? Some do, until rats get into their barley. Then they borrow him and speak gently. She rises, takes little dried fish from a shelf, and sets it near the hearth. Piers descends by way of a cupboard, a stool, and a sack of oats, each step made with the solemn confidence of a pilgrim approaching a relic. He eats the fish while the dog watches with deep spiritual injury. Isabel returns to her work. Cats trouble people because they cross boundaries, day and night, house and wild, hearth and graveyard. A dog follows the road with you. A cat leaves, returns, and explains nothing. For folk already frightened of women who live alone. Herbs they do not know. Babies who stop breathing. Milk that spoils, and dreams that feel too real. A cat becomes a little door. They look at it and imagine what might come through. Do they blame you too, you ask? Her mouth twists. When cures work, I am useful. When they fail, I am suspicious, same as cats, though I scratch less. Piers looks up, as if disputing that last point. She tells you of remedies meant to keep cats from stealing luck, a saucer turned upside down beneath the churn, salt thrown over the left shoulder, an iron nail hidden in a dairy wall, 3 hairs from the suspected cat burned in the hearth. Some swear that a cat's whisker sewn into a purse protects money from thieves. Others say carrying such a thing invites the devil to count your coins. In one village, she says, people once believed that rubbing a child's gums with a cat's tail eased teething. She gives you a look over the mortar. It eased nothing but the family's supply of unbitten fingers. The little joke lands softly, and you laugh into your bitter drink. Night thickens against the cottage window, pressing the room inward. Isabel gives you a heel of bread spread with something garlicky and warm, and you eat slowly while she pours a little broth into a wooden bowl. The dog receives a scrap at last and forgives the entire household. Piers climbs into a basket of clean linen near the hearth, which Isabel notices and permits with the exhausted mercy of someone who has lost this battle before. For a while, you simply sit. The fire pops. Herbs rustle overhead. The leeches drift in their bowl. The candlelight shines on Isabel's jars, each one holding some fragment of forest, field, garden, or rumour. Here, fear of cats does not seem foolish exactly. It seems tangled with illness, hunger, loss, women's work, night noises, milk pails, cradles, old prayers, and the desperate wish that misfortune might be persuaded, trapped, named, or turned aside. When you rise to leave, Isabel gives you a small packet tied with thread. For your feet, she says, yarrow and grease. Rub it in before sleep unless you prefer blisters as travelling companions. You thank her. At the door, she lifts the latch and looks out into the dark path. If you pass the old keep tonight, ask for the lower hall. They will let travellers sleep near the stables if the guards are not drunk or proud. Avoid both when possible. You step into the cold with the packet in your pouch, the dog at your side, and the smell of herbs clinging to your cloak. Behind you, through the small window, you see Piers in the basket, Isabel by the fire, and the leeches glimmering faintly in their bowl like strange little monks at prayer. Ahead, the road bends toward darker fields, and somewhere beyond them, a keep by torchlight. The rain has stopped, but every branch still drips, and as you walk on, you carry with you the healer's words. Fear comes for everything. Tonight, it only happens to be wearing fur. The path beyond Dame Isabel's cottage narrows quickly, as if the orchard itself has second thoughts about letting travellers pass. Bare branches lean over you, dripping the last of the rain in slow, cold beads that find the back of your neck with monkish precision. The packet of yarrow and grease rests in your pouch, warm only because you keep touching it to make certain it is still there. The smell of herbs follows you for a while, sage, garlic, lavender. Smoke until the wet fields take it apart and replace it with earth. Old leaves and distant animals settling in for night. The tawny-eared dog walks close now. Even he seems to understand that evening has changed its mood. In town, darkness gathers among shutters and hearths, softened by voices. On the open road, it comes wider and quieter, spreading across furrows, hedges, and empty ditches until the world feels larger than it ought to be. Behind you, Isabel's candle dwindles to a small honey-coloured point in the cottage window. Ahead, somewhere beyond the fields, a keep waits. If the healer's advice holds true and the guards are not drunk, proud, or creatively both. You follow a cart track marked by deep ruts filled with black water. Here and there, stones rise through the mud like old bones. The sky clears just enough to show a pale seam of moon behind torn clouds. Frost begins to silver the grass again. On your right, a byre stands near a cluster of hayricks covered in thatch. You hear cattle shifting inside, the soft thud of heavy bodies, the occasional chain clink. Above the door hangs another horseshoe, and beside it, a little bunch of dried rue tied with wool thread. Someone has daubed a cross in whitewash on the lintel. A second, smaller cross has been scratched below it, perhaps by a child, perhaps by someone who thought one layer of protection showed a troubling lack of ambition. You pass a dark pond where reeds whisper together. The dog stops and growls at nothing you can see. Please let it be nothing, you murmur. The dog continues growling. A shape moves in the reeds low, quick, pale under the moon. Your breath catches. Then a heron lifts with an offended croak, wings unfolding like a grey cloak shaken by an invisible servant. The dog barks once. Proud of having defended you from waterfowl, you praise him softly because courage is courage even when poorly informed. The keep appears just after the pond road rises. At first it is only a block of deeper shadow on the low hill, then a line of wall, then a tower squared against the clouded moon. It is not a great royal fortress, no shining seat of legend, but a hard little stronghold of stone and timber, built to watch roads, collect dues, shelter men-at-arms, and make local villagers remember who owns the hill. A ditch circles it, half full of rainwater. A wooden bridge crosses to the outer gate, where 2 torches burn in iron brackets and throw nervous light across wet planks. As you approach, the dog's paws click on the bridge. The gate above is shut but not sealed. A guard leans from the small opening beside it, helmet low over his brow, beard damp, eyes narrowed with the hopeful suspicion of a man whose evening might become interesting. Who comes? A traveller, you say, seeking shelter. All travellers seek shelter. Some also seek pockets. I bring neither goods nor energy. This appears to recommend you. Another guard laughs from somewhere inside. The first man looks at the dog. That yours. He follows. So do debts. A bar scrapes. The postern opens, and you duck inside beneath stone darkened by smoke and weather. The inner yard smells of straw, horse sweat, wet leather, ash, and boiled beans. Torches hiss on the walls. A stable boy carries a bucket across the yard, slopping water over his shoes and saying nothing, which suggests either discipline or despair. Horses stamp in stalls under a lean-to roof. A smith's shed stands quiet, its anvil black in the dimness. Above, narrow windows glow in the keep, and smoke lifts from a kitchen vent where supper is clearly happening somewhere more fortunate than the yard. The guard who admitted you is named Hob, or at least everyone calls him that with sufficient confidence. He wears a patched cloak over a mail shirt and carries a spear whose point has seen either battle or very poor storage. He leads you toward the lower hall, muttering that travellers may sleep near the stable wall if they do not steal, preach, sing, or die inconveniently before morning. Inside the lower hall, warmth comes in layers. The nearest layer is animal damp wool, leather, dogs, boots, and men. The second is smoke from the hearth. The third, faint but promising, is the smell of onions, beans, and fat from a pot hanging over coals. Rushes cover the floor, though the ones near the door have surrendered to mud. Along one wall, guards sit on benches, loosening belts, repairing straps, oiling knife sheaths, and eating from wooden bowls. A few servants move among them, carrying trenchers of coarse bread and jugs of small ale. Above, the rafters are black as night, hung with hooks, ropes, and bundles of dried herbs someone has placed there to sweeten the air or frighten it into behaving. Hob points to a space near the hearth, not the best place, but near enough that your wet cloak begins to steam. Stay there. Keep the dog there. If he bites, I bite you. The dog sits immediately, presenting himself as a citizen of peace. You accept a bowl of beans and onions from a kitchen boy whose sleeves are too long and whose expression suggests that every adult has disappointed him. The food is plain, soft, and smoky, thick enough to hold a spoon upright if one had the leisure to test architecture at supper. You eat with gratitude. At the far end of the hall, a man with a scar under his eye tells a story about a merchant who tried to avoid a bridge toll by claiming his donkey was a relative. No one believes the story. But everyone enjoys the donkey, which is often enough. You begin to relax. Then a black shape slips along the high beam above the hearth. The hall notices in pieces. First the kitchen boy glances up, then one guard nudges another. Hob, who has just lifted his cup, freezes with the cup halfway to his mouth. The shape pauses on the beam, tail balancing, eyes shining green in torchlight. A cat. Not the market cat, not Piers, not the brindled alehouse hunter, though by now all cats seem to belong to one extended and morally ambiguous family. This one is lean, dark, and sharp-faced, with a kink in its tail. It walks above the hall with perfect confidence, passing over helmets, spears, bowls, and gossip as if inspecting inferior tenants. Hob lowers his cup, that one again. A stable boy near the door makes the sign of the cross. It was on the battlement last night. So was I, says Hob. No one calls me a witch. Give them time, says the scarred man. Laughter moves through the hall, but lightly, with one eye still upward. The cat steps from the beam onto a shelf near the wall, then down to a barrel head. It passes a row of hanging keys, pauses, and rubs its cheek against the largest iron ring. The keys swing and clink softly. The sound cuts through the hall in a way that makes several heads turn toward the dark stair leading down to the cellars. The kitchen boy whispers, "They say it knows the Undercroft." "Cats know holes," says Hob. "They say there is a hidden passage under the old chapel." "There are always hidden passages in stories," says the scarred man. "Never in the wall where you need one." The boy's voice drops further. "My cousin swears it came out of the wall behind the salt chest." "Your cousin swears bread tastes better if you cut it with a silver knife," Hob says. "Your cousin has never owned silver." Still, the mention of the Undercroft changes the air. Keeps are built on layer store cellars, old foundations, forgotten drains, blocked doors, little rooms used for salt, ale, grain, armour, bones of repairs, and things no one wishes to carry upstairs. Darkness accumulates below stone buildings the way soot gathers in rafters. A cat moving through such spaces becomes more than a mouser. It becomes a messenger from beneath. A woman from the kitchen enters with a basket of trenchers and sees the cat by the keys. "There you are, Saint Scratch." Hob snorts. "Do not saint it. It earns sainthood better than most of you." Rats in the barley bins again. "Then let it hunt below," says the boy. "But why walk the battlements at midnight?" The kitchen woman sets down the basket. "Because mice do not respect architecture." You chew your beans slowly and listen. The guards speak of cats seen on walls before storms, cats crying in old wells, cats vanishing through locked doors. One man says his aunt believed that a cat sleeping on a soldier's cloak meant the cloak would soon cover a corpse. Another says that is nonsense. Cats sleep on whatever is warm, and soldiers tend to be more foolishly still than laundry. Some swear that witches send cats to count men in a garrison before illness comes. Others say cats come because garrisons spill grain and leave bones under tables, which is less mystical but easier to prove. No one can quite agree whether the animal protects the stores or spies on the living. The uncertainty pleases the fire, which snaps and throws sparks up toward the rafters. A chaplain enters from the stair, a small man wrapped in a dark cloak, carrying a book under one arm and looking as if he has been interrupted by the entire world. He notices the cat and stops. "Remove that creature from the keys," he says. The kitchen woman lifts a brow. "You remove it, father." The chaplain considers the cat. The cat considers the chaplain. The hall waits. After a moment, the chaplain says, "It may remain briefly." The scarred man coughs into his cup. Hobbs studies the ceiling with great discipline. Even the dog at your feet seems to understand that a victory has occurred. The chaplain comes to the hearth and warms his hands. Creatures of the night invite foolish talk. Foolish talk was here before the cat, Hobbs says. And will remain after, says the kitchen woman. The chaplain sighs, but not angrily. He tells them of old warnings, of women accused of keeping familiars, of charms found in walls, of strange marks scratched into stable doors. He speaks carefully, perhaps because he knows fear is tinder and he holds a candle. A cat may be only a cat, he says, yet the devil uses what is near at hand. A proud thought, a bitter tongue, a hungry ambition, a lonely creature, a human heart, most of all. The hall grows quieter at that, because it is less comforting to blame the heart than the cat. Saint Scratch, meanwhile, leaps down from the barrel, trots across the rushes, and slips beneath the stair. The dog rises. No, you whisper. The dog looks at you, then at the stair, then sits again with a small whine, nobly resisting adventure after discovering it has rules. Hobbs sees your glance, best not follow, cellars are black and the old wall has gaps. Rats, damp, things stored and forgotten. Men have frightened themselves with less. The hall settles back into supper. The chaplain eats bread. The kitchen woman sends the boy for more ale. The guards return to stories of tolls, rusted buckles, and a travelling knife grinder who cheated everyone by leaving before the knives were tested. But the cat's passage remains in the room like a draught under a door. You feel it when the keys clink again, though no hand touches them. You feel it in the boy's sideways looks toward the stair. You feel it in Hobbs' muttered charm as he checks the latch on the outer door. Later, you're shown a place near the stable wall, where straw has been laid under a rough wool blanket. It is not elegant, but it is dry enough to inspire gratitude, and close enough to the horses that their breathing fills the dark with steady animal warmth. The dog curls against your legs without negotiation. Above, through a narrow slit window, you can see torchlight flickering along the battlement. For a long while, sleep does not come. You listen to the keep settling hooves shifting, a guard coughing, wind brushing stone, a pot being scraped in the kitchen, distant laughter fading, somewhere below, perhaps in the undercroft, perhaps only in your thoughts. A cat moves silently among barrels, salt chests, and old foundations. It hunts what people need hunted. It walks where people do not wish to go. It vanishes into darkness and returns with no account of itself. And in this keep by torchlight, among guards, cooks, stable boys, and a chaplain careful with fear, you understand again how easily a useful creature becomes uncanny. A cat in a kitchen is a servant. A cat on a battlement is an omen. A cat by the keys is a question. The difference is only where the torchlight falls. Morning comes inside the keep as a dim greyness pressed against the narrow windows. Not so much light as the idea of light waiting its turn. You wake beneath the rough wool blanket with the torn-eared dog heavy against your shins and the smell of horses, straw, smoke, and old stone wrapped around you. For a moment, you lie still and listen. Somewhere above, a guard's boots scrape along the wall walk. Somewhere below, a bucket knocks against a stair. A horse exhales in a long, warm rush, and another answers by shifting its weight with a soft thud. The keep is waking as all old buildings wake, reluctantly, joint by joint. Your first clear thought is that the yarrow grease from Dame Isabel still rests in your pouch, unused, while your feet ache with the quiet outrage of neglected advice. This is a very medieval problem wisdom is available, but you're too cold to apply it. The dog lifts his head when you stir, then yawns so widely it seems he's trying to swallow the lower hall. A stable boy passes with a lantern and a forkful of hay, his hair sticking up in damp tufts. He sees you awake and jerks his chin toward the hearth room. Kitchen's giving scraps before the steward counts them. Best hurry. This, you have learned, is not merely a suggestion but a rare alignment of mercy and opportunity. You follow him through the lower hall, where yesterday's rushes have been kicked into tired heaps. A servant with a broom pushes mud, straw, and crumbs toward the door in a motion so practiced it looks almost devotional. Near the hearth, a pot already simmers. The kitchen woman from the night before, the one who called the dark cat Saint Scratch, stands with her sleeves rolled and her hair tucked beneath a linen cloth. She is cutting coarse bread into pieces and handing them out with the stern fairness of someone who knows that hunger makes philosophers of everyone and saints of no one. She gives you bread, a spoonful of onion mash, and a warning. Eat near the door. We open the store after. The store. Grain, cheese, salt fish, beans, candles, all the things mice love and men pretend they guard better than cats. At the mention of cats, you glance toward the stair where St. Scratch vanished the night before. The kitchen woman notices and smiles without softness. You will see. After you eat, she leads a small procession into the keep storage rooms herself. The stable boy with a lantern, Hob the guard with a ring of keys, a clerk carrying a tablet. You, because you are apparently available, and the dog because no door has yet convinced him that it does not concern him. The stair descends beneath an arch of cold stone. The air changes quickly, losing the smoky warmth of the hall and taking on the mineral breath of the lower room's damp wall, packed earth, old wood, salt, cheese rind, grain dust, and the faint sharpness of mouse. Hob unlocks the first door. The iron key turns with a reluctant scrape. "Mind your head," he says. You duck and enter the storehouse. The room is larger than you expect. Low-ceilinged and lined with bins, barrels, hanging sacks, and shelves. In the lantern glow, winter itself seems stacked and measured here. Sacks of barley lean against the wall. Oats fill a chest with a fitted lid. Wheels of cheese rest on boards, some wrapped in cloth, some rubbed with salt. Smoked fish hang in bundles from hooks, stiff and dark, their smell rich enough to argue with. Strings of onions and garlic sway overhead. Crocks of lard stand sealed with cloth and twine. Dried peas, beans, and lentils sit in clay jars. A small locked box contains spices, not many, but enough to make the clerk glance at it like a priest near a relic. Beeswax candles lie wrapped in linen, guarded from damp and teeth alike. This is not treasure in the jewelled sense. It is better. It is warmth, light, broth, supper, wages, fasting days survived, feast days made bearable, and the long argument against hunger. The clerk kneels beside a grain bin and runs his fingers along the wood, gnawing here. The kitchen woman bends closer, fresh. The stable boy lifts the lantern, and you see the marks, tiny scraped crescents along the edge, pale where teeth have cut through older dirt. Nearby, a dusting of grain lies scattered on the floor. The dog sniffs, then sneezes. Hob mutters something that sounds like a prayer, but may be a curse wearing church clothes. Mice, you ask? Mice. Rats if the saints are bored, says the kitchen woman. No one can quite agree whether mice are merely pests or tiny punishments for poor housekeeping. Some say they breed from damp straw. Some swear that old grain, left too long in darkness, can bring them forth as if the earth itself has teeth. Learned men may object. but learned men do not always sleep beside the flour bin. The stable boy points toward the corner. There! 2 small shapes dart from beneath a sack and vanish behind a barrel. The dog lunges. You catch his collar just in time, though he seems deeply wounded by your lack of faith. Hob thumps his spear butt on the floor. The clerk lifts his robe like a startled aunt. The kitchen woman does not flinch. She only turns toward the dark space between the barrels and says, very calmly, "Scratch." For a moment, nothing happens. Then, from somewhere above the shelves, the cat appears. Saint Scratch steps into the lantern light along a beam no wider than your wrist. The kink in its tail makes a crooked shadow on the wall. It pauses over the hanging fish, eyes bright, ears forward, body low, in the storehouse, away from gossip and hearth jokes. It seems changed, not wicked, not holy, but purposeful. Every line of it points toward the unseen movement in the walls. The kitchen woman whispers, "Watch." The cat drops lightly onto a barrel lid, then to the floor, moving without sound. It pauses by the grain dust, sniffs, waits. The whole room seems to hold its breath, except for the dog, who breathes loudly enough for several species. A faint scratch comes from behind the sack. Saint Scratch moves in one sudden blur. There is a squeak, brief and thin, then stillness. The cat emerges with a mouse. No one cheers. The moment is too small for cheering and too important for mockery. The kitchen woman nods as if a debt has been paid. Hob looks away, perhaps embarrassed by having distrusted so useful a creature. The clerk writes something on his tablet, because clerks will record even silence if given time. One mouse eats little, the stable boy says. One mouse becomes many, says the kitchen woman. Many become empty bins. Empty bins become hard faces at Candlemas. She takes the mouse from where the cat drops it and tosses it into a waste pail. St. Scratch sits and begins washing one paw, apparently finished with the spiritual portion of the work. You move deeper into the store. The clerk checks measures, counting notches on a tally stick. He marks how much barley remains, how many cheeses, how many fish, how many candles, how much salt. Salt matters more than you expected before this journey. It keeps fish from rotting, meat from turning, bodies from weakness, and winter from winning too easily. Even the salt chest has charms scratched into its lid across, a circle, and 3 little strokes. The stable boy says they keep thieves away. Hob says they keep damp away. The kitchen woman says they keep fools from asking why everything has marks on it. Above the cheese shelf hangs a little bunch of rue and rosemary tied with thread. Against vermin you ask. Against stink, she says, and vermin, and because my mother did it. That here is nearly law. In another room you find barrels of ale, jars of honey, baskets of hard apples, and bundles of rushlights. The smell is sweeter here, but the danger is the same. Every stored thing attracts hunger, human and otherwise. The keep may have walls, guards, keys, and a chaplain. Yet a mouse needs only a gap the width of a finger. Winter teaches humility by sending small enemies. Saint Scratch follows from room to room, slipping through legs and shadows. The dog watches with frustration that grows almost poetic. Once, the cat leaps onto the locked spice box and looks down at everyone, and Hob mutters, "There's your lord of the Undercroft." The kitchen woman snorts. Better than most lords, eats less, works more. The clerk, perhaps feeling loyalty to hierarchy, says it still should not be near the spices. Neither should you, she says. Cinnamon went missing after Epiphany. The stable boy laughs until Hob tells him to hold the lantern steady. By the time the stores are inspected, the morning has brightened. Not much, but enough that grey light creeps down the stair behind you. A few gnawed places are marked for repair. A broken lid is set aside. Grain is swept, cheese turned, fish counted, candles checked for tooth marks. It is ordinary labour, the quiet maintenance that keeps a household alive. No songs are sung for it. No monk illuminates a border with heroic images of someone sealing a bean jar. Yet without such work, all the romance of winter collapses into hunger. As you climb back toward the hall, Saint Scratch passes you on the stair, mouse-quick and silent, at the top. It pauses in a stripe of daylight, looks back once, then vanishes toward the kitchen. Last night, on the battlement, it seemed an omen. By the keys, a question. In the undercroft, it becomes answer enough. You stand in the lower hall while the kitchen woman carries her tablet of needs to the steward, and Hob hangs the iron keys back on his belt. The dog presses against your leg, perhaps hoping you will confirm that he too is useful. You scratch his ear, which seems to satisfy him. Outside, beyond the keep walls, frost still grips the fields. Inside, the grain rests a little safer. The cheese survives another day, and the smoked fish swing gently from their hooks. People may fear cats for moving through darkness, but darkness is where the mice live too. And as the hearth smoke rises into the rafters, you begin to understand the uneasy bargain more clearly. The medieval world needs the cat precisely because it goes where people do not, sees what people miss, and returns from the hidden places with proof between its teeth. By late morning, the keep loosens its hold on you. Hob stands by the gate with his spear tucked under one arm, chewing a strip of dried meat and watching the road as if expecting it to misbehave. The kitchen woman gives you a heel of bread wrapped in a scrap of cloth, along with a bit of hard cheese and a warning not to trust any bridge that looks recently repaired. The stable boy offers the torn-eared dog a final scratch behind the ears, which the dog accepts with the gravity of a lord receiving homage. St. Scratch is nowhere visible, though you catch the faintest sound from the rafters above the kitchen door, a soft shift of paws, or perhaps merely the old timber settling into its day. You step out beneath the gate arch and back onto the road. The air has turned colder after the rain, and the world has a washed, brittle brightness. Puddles along the cart track wear skins of thin ice. Grass blades glitter in the ditches. Far behind you, the keep rises on its low hill, torches extinguished now, walls grey under the pale sun. It seems less mysterious by day, more like what it is: stone, labour, hunger, authority, damp rooms, stored grain, tired people, and one cat doing work for which it will receive no legal thanks. The dog trots at your side, nose low, tail describing a hopeful arc. You share a corner of bread with him after the first bend, because companionship requires customs, and by now he has clearly written this one into law. The road dips away from the keep, crosses a strip of frozen meadow, and runs toward the edge of a smaller settlement where the cottages are fewer, poorer, and spaced wider apart. Their thatch is patched. Their garden beds lie winter bare beneath straw. Smoke rises from some roofs, but not all. At one doorway, an old woman beats a rug with more conviction than strength. At another, a boy chips ice from a water trough. He watches you pass and then watches the dog longer, perhaps weighing whether the animal is a sign, a stray, or an opportunity. You walk until the cottages thin and the fields begin again. There, at the edge of town, beyond the last common well and just before the road bends toward a patch of alder scrub, stands a small house leaning under a roof of dark thatch. It sits apart, not far enough to be truly alone, but far enough that distance has become a statement. A low fence of woven hazel surrounds a yard where winter cabbages crouch beneath netting, and a few hens pick mournfully at frozen ground. A bundle of firewood is stacked with careful thrift beside the door. Over the lintel hangs a sprig of rowan tied with faded thread, and beneath it, scratched into the oak, is a cross so worn by time and fingers that it looks like a memory of itself. A cat sits on the fence, black with a white fleck at the chin. For one strange breath, you think of the cat from the town gate, the market, the manor court, the keep rafters, all the cats of the journey folding into this one shape. But this cat is smaller, older perhaps, one ear notched, fur rough at the shoulders. It watches you with yellow eyes, neither welcoming nor afraid. The dog stops. The cat's tail gives a single slow movement. The dog, having learned something from recent history, pretends to be deeply interested in a frozen cabbage leaf instead. The cottage door opens. A widow steps out carrying a small pail. She is thin, wrapped in a brown wool gown and a patched cloak, with a linen kerchief tied beneath her chin. Her face is not stern, exactly, but careful, the face of someone accustomed to being observed and therefore economical with expression. When she sees you at the fence, she pauses. "Road's that way," she says, nodding past the alder scrub. "So I hoped. Hope works better after noon." Her voice is dry, not unkind. You ask whether you might warm your hands a moment by her fire and offer a share of the hard cheese from the keep in return. She glances at the cheese, then at your wet boots, then at the dog, then at the cat on the fence. Dog bite cats. Not successfully. The corner of her mouth lifts. Then come in. Her name is Ellsworth, though a neighbour once called her Ellen as you passed the market, and perhaps the town uses both depending on affection, irritation, or how much butter has spoiled. The inside of her cottage is small but neatly kept. The packed earth floor is strewn with rushes and dried lavender. Not much, but enough to sweeten the air. A little fire burns on the hearth, where a pot of pottage simmers with leeks, peas, and something smoky enough to make the dog sit instantly and attempt sainthood. Above the fire hangs an iron pot hook, a few strips of dried herbs, and a string of onions. A shelf holds 2 wooden bowls, a pewter cup, a cracked jug, a spindle, a distaff wound with wool, and a small clay lamp. Near the bed, under a folded blanket, you glimpse a pair of iron shears laid open in the old protective way, a charm against night harm, elf mischief, and whatever else might trouble a woman sleeping alone. The cat slips in after you without being invited and leaps onto a stool near the hearth. "That is Sable," Ellsworth says. "She believes the house is hers." "Is it not?" "It is, but I dislike encouraging her." You sit on a low bench while Ellsworth pours hot water over herbs in a chipped cup and sets it near you. The drink smells of mint and something bitter. She cuts the cheese carefully, saving half, sharing none with extravagance but all with dignity. The dog receives a crumb of bread after staring with the full sorrow of a saint at martyrdom. Sable receives a sliver of smoked fish from a covered dish, which she eats without gratitude, because gratitude would imply dependence. Outside, voices pass along the road. 2 women, perhaps returning from the well, slow near the cottage. Their words come blurred at first, then sharper through the thin wall. "Still keeps that cat." "Aye, sleeps with it by the hearth," they say. "Too much alone, that one." Too much alone turns thought strange. Ellsworth's knife pauses, only for a heartbeat. Then she continues cutting cheese. You pretend not to hear, because kindness sometimes means being a poor witness. The women move on, their voices fading toward the village. Sable licks one paw. The fire settles. The dog lowers his head onto his paws, sensing perhaps that this is not a moment for foolishness. After a while, Elswith says, "My husband kept ferrets. No one said he was a witch." "Ferrets are less poetic, you say." "They stink worse. That should count against them." A small laugh passes between you, quiet and welcome. She tells you that her husband died 3 winters ago, after a cough took hold and would not release him. Before that, they kept 2 cows, more hens, and a strip of good garden near the lower field. Afterward came dues, debts, a bad harvest, a nephew who promised help and took a chest, and neighbours who grew kind in public and cautious in doorways. She does spinning when wool is brought to her. She mends sleeves. She trades eggs when the hens feel generous, which they rarely do in winter. Sable arrived as a half-starved kitten under the woodpile during the first spring after her husband's death. Caught 3 mice in the first week, Elswith says, better than the nephew. Sable blinks, accepting the comparison as obvious. No one can quite agree whether loneliness makes a person more likely to keep cats, or whether cats simply choose houses where silence leaves room. Either way, you feel how the two have made a household together, the woman with her spindle and careful fire, the cat with her silent patrols, each filling the edges of the other's day. A cat asks little, explains less, and does not pity. For someone watched too closely by human eyes, that may be a mercy. Elswith rises to stir the pottage. Her hands are red at the knuckles from cold work. A strip of wool hangs over the back of a chair, half-spun thread wound on the spindle beside it. She tells you that Sable keeps the grain crock safe. She keeps rats from the thatch. She sleeps near Elswith's feet when the wind comes under the door. Once, during a storm, the cat cried until Elswith woke and found a coal fallen near the rushes. Saved the house, perhaps, she says, or wanted my place on the blanket. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, and I am the only one telling it. And the neighbours, she shrugs. Neighbours like reasons. My butter turns, it is the cat. Their butter turns, it is weather. My hens stop laying, it is the cat. Their hens stop, it is winter. I gather herbs, I mutter charms. They gather herbs, they follow grandmother's wisdom. Her voice holds no bitterness sharp enough to cut, only something worn smooth by use. You remember Marjorie at the manor court, her daughter holding the dark cat beneath her cloak. You remember Dame Isabel saying that when cures work, she is useful, and when they fail, she is suspicious. Here, in this small cottage, suspicion feels less like thunder than smoke seeping under a door. It enters quietly. It stains everything slowly. Poverty, widowhood, solitude, and a cat by the hearth become a pattern others can read in the worst possible light. Some swear that women who live alone learn too much from animals. Others say animals are simply kinder company than people who arrive carrying questions like knives. Elswith gives you a bowl of pottage. It is thin but hot, and the leeks taste sweet after the road. She apologizes for the plainness of it, and you tell her truthfully that it is good. The dog receives the bowl to lick afterward and does so with solemn devotion. Sable watches from the stool, unimpressed by canine table manners, then leaps lightly to the small window ledge. A neighbour passes outside, glances in, and quickly looks away. Elswith sees, of course she sees. Once, she says, the priest told them in sermon not to spread tales. Did it help? For a week, then Mistress Alder's cream soured. You both smile, though softly. The afternoon light dims toward blue. Elswith sets a beeswax candle on the table, not large, but enough to bring gold into the little room. Beeswax is dearer than tallow, and she burns it sparingly. From my husband's cousin, she says, for all souls, I saved the end. Its flame shines on the clay wall, the spindle, the iron shears, the sleeping dog, and Sable's narrow face in the window. You ask whether she fears the cat stories. She looks at Sable for a long while. I fear hunger. I fear the roof going. I fear fever. I fear men who say they come to help and then count what is mine. A cat is easy. Outside, the winter road lies quiet. From the village, faintly, comes the sound of a bell, perhaps calling evening prayer, perhaps marking work's end, perhaps simply reminding the fields that people still measure time against the dark. Elswith packs a little more bread into your cloth than she can likely spare, and when you protest, she lifts one eyebrow. Do not insult my household before the cat. Sable, hearing her title invoked, turns from the window and stares at you. You accept the bread. When you step back into the cold, the dog at your side, Elswith stands in the doorway with the candlelight behind her and the black cat winding once around her skirts. The two seem small against the wide fields, yet not weak. The cottage is poor, watched, whispered over, and still warm. You walk away slowly, feeling the road harden under the frost, and you understand that the fear of cats is rarely only about cats. It gathers around those who sit at the edge, the lonely, the old, the poor, the women who know herbs, the children who love strange creatures, the households that do not fit neatly under other people's comfort. Behind you, the door closes. A thin line of light remains beneath it for a moment, then vanishes. Ahead, the evening bends back toward the Pilgrim Road, and the bell calls again through the cold. In your pouch, the bread is warm from Elswith's hearth. In your mind, Sable's yellow eyes remain, not wicked, not holy, simply watching from the window of a house that has learned to survive being misunderstood. By the time you leave Elswith's cottage, the daylight has thinned to a pale ash colour, and the road ahead looks as if it has been rubbed nearly out of the world. Frost begins to tighten over the puddles, and the fields lie quiet beneath a sky the colour of old tin. The torn-eared dog trots at your heel, full of borrowed pottage and moral confidence. Behind you, Elswith's small house settles into evening, its candle hidden now, its warmth folded close around widow and cat alike. You carry her bread in your pouch and her words in your thoughts, and both feel weightier than they first did. The road bends back toward higher ground, where, some miles ahead, an abbey lies beyond a stand of beech and ash. Elswith told you as much before you left, pointing with the hand that held the candle. If you keep to the frost ridge and do not wander into the marsh hollow, you'll hear their bells before you see their walls, she said. Knock at the guest house door. Monks prefer travellers cold rather than dead. It saves on burial arrangements. So you walk under the gathering dark, boots crisping the frozen edges of mud, your breath lifting white before you. The dog ranges a little, then returns, as if unwilling to let the night take liberties. Once, at the edge of a field, you hear the rustle of something small in the stubble and see a shape slip low between two stones. Cat or fox. It is hard to tell. Even now, it is hard to tell whether your mind has become too ready to find pause in every shadow, or whether the world truly is full of them. The abbey bells reach you first, just as Elswith promised. Not a full ringing, only a far, thin sequence floating through the cold, each note clear as iron in water. The sound carries over the fields and through the bare trees until it seems the night itself is being measured. You follow it along a hedge, across a narrow bridge with frost shining on the boards, and finally up toward a wall of pale stone barely visible under the moon. The abbey sits broad and quiet beyond, its church tower rising above the cloister roofs, its windows dim with candlelight. At the guest-house door, you knock and wait long enough to consider becoming a saint from patience alone. At last a lay brother admits you, wrapped in a wool cloak with sleep still hanging from him like an extra garment. He gives you a bench, a blanket, and a place near a wall where the wind reaches you only by negotiation. The dog, by now a veteran of ecclesiastical lodging, curls neatly under the bench and sighs with the profound satisfaction of one who has once again secured shelter without paying tithe. You sleep in fragments. Bells mark the night in patient divisions. Somewhere a shutter taps. Somewhere a novice coughs as if apologizing to the dark. The half-burned candle on a shelf near the door gutters lower and lower until it seems held upright only by faith and habit. When at last you open your eyes fully, the room is almost black. Then the bells begin again. Before sunrise they sound different, colder, perhaps more solitary. The notes come through the frost-stiff dark and settle into your bones before your mind is awake enough to object. You sit up beneath the blanket. Your breath smokes faintly in the guest-house air. The dog lifts his head, looks around in mild alarm, and then realizes no breakfast is visible, which offends him more than theology. A shape stands in the doorway. It is Brother Aelred, or rather, it is the same narrow-faced monk you met before, though dawn has sharpened him further. His sleeves are tucked high, his tonsure gleams faintly in the candlelight, and he wears the expression of a man who has spent the night suspecting both evil and draughts. He inclines his head when he sees you awake. "You are here," he says, as though the fact had been uncertain until observed. "So are you." He ignores this. Come quietly. There is something to be seen. This is not the sort of invitation that comforts a person before dawn, but curiosity and cold often make allies. You pull on your cloak and follow him into the passage. The dog rises at once and pads after you. Brother Aelred glances down. The dog comes too. He has appointed himself. Aelred gives a small sigh that suggests creation has become untidy again. The abbey before sunrise feels like another world layered beneath the day world. The cloister walk is silvered with frost, each stone pale and hard under the dim sky. The herb beds in the garth lie white at the edges. A lamp burns near the chapter house door. Somewhere farther off, monks chant the office in low, woven voices, the sound passing through stone like warm breath through cloth. You follow Aelred under the arches while the dog's claws click softly behind you. "What is it to be seen?" you whisper. "A sign," he says. This is not encouraging. He leads you first past the church porch and then along the outer wall toward the little passage beside the infirmary. There he stops and raises the candle stub in his hand. On the stone threshold, in a dusting of frost and ash, are cat prints, neat, deliberate, crossing from one side of the passage to the other. You look at them. The dog sniffs and sneezes. Aelred studies your face, perhaps expecting revelation. You see, "I see tracks. Where there are tracks, there is presence." This seems difficult to dispute. He lowers his voice further. 3 mornings now, always before Lord's. The cat passes the infirmary, then the chapter door, then the place where penitents kneel. You wait. And what kind of beast chooses such places? You think of every cat you've met on this road and conclude that they choose places containing warmth, smells, food, and startled humans. Aelred, however, is not in a practical mood. He leads on. At the infirmary door, the frost is thinner, but again there are prints, lightly marked in the whitened dust beside the threshold. At the chapter house, a few more. Then at the narrow side door near the church porch, where penitents wait before confession. There they are again, small clear pores, as if some tidy shadow has paced back and forth in contemplation. Brother Aelred clasps the candle tighter. No one can quite agree whether animals sense corruption in the body, in the air, or in the soul. But some swear that cats are drawn to hidden rot, hidden sickness, and hidden sin. The bells fade. The chant from the church rises softly, a thread of Latin too distant to follow in words. Frost shines on the cloister stones. The dog sits and scratches his ear with a violence that nearly topples him. You think the cat reveals sinners, you ask. I think, Aelred says carefully, that where it lingers, something concealed may be near. And what has been concealed? He hesitates, which is answer enough. Brother Martin says I mistake coincidence for wisdom. That seems uncharitable of him. He smiled while saying it. That is his worst habit. You walk a little farther. Aelred points to a windowsill, to the step by a side chapel, to a patch of thawed earth beneath the wall. Each bears a sign of feline passing, some fresh, some blurred. The trail is not dramatic. No door has been scratched by satanic claws. No relic glows. No confessor faints into the font. Yet Aelred follows the prince with solemn, quivering conviction, and you begin to understand that for him, the cat offers structure to unease. Monasteries are full of self-examination, whispered failings, hidden doubts, and long hours when a person is left alone with conscience. In such a place, a creature that walks silently where men confess becomes easy to enlist as a moral detective. The dog noses at the base of a wall and then stares upward. You follow his gaze. On the low roof above the porch sits a cat. Grey, broad-faced, one ear nicked. Perhaps the same kitchen philosopher from the earlier monastery. Perhaps its cousin. Perhaps simply another abbey mouser with a gift for appearing at the correct moment. It wraps its tail around its paws and looks down at you, at Brother Aelred, at the candle, and at the whole anxious arrangement of human meaning with calm superiority. Aelred inhales sharply. There. The cat blinks. You wait for some sign, but the animal merely turns its head toward the church, then back toward you. Its whiskers catch the paling edge of dawn. What sin does it reveal now, you ask softly? Aelred's face tightens. Mock if you must, yet it appears at the infirmary after fevers, at the penitent door after troubled confessions, at the cell of Brother Oswin when he lies about fasting. That last one may be because Brother Oswin keeps cheese. Aelred almost smiles, though he fights it bravely. He does keep cheese. There then. He's quiet for a while. Together you stand in the whitening cold, you and the nervous monk, the patient dog, and the cat on the roof. The bells have stopped, but now the first birds begin, thin and uncertain. A sliver of pale gold touches the eastern rim of the sky. In the church, the chant continues, gentle and even. Aelred lowers the candle and looks again at the prince. Perhaps, he says at last, it is not the cat that reveals the sin. What then? Perhaps only the mind, but the cat gives it somewhere to point. This is the wisest thing he has said, and it seems to surprise him as much as it does you. The grey cat rises, stretches, and walks along the roofline until it disappears beyond the little bell turret, leaving behind only the memory of its paws and a monk still staring after it. You follow Aelred back through the frost-bright cloister as dawn slowly gathers over the abbey walls. He has not solved his mystery. You have not solved him. Yet the morning feels gentler for having watched him try. And as the first true light reaches the worn stones, you think again of all the ways people read cats in this world omen: helper, spy, comfort, accusation, companion, sign. Here before sunrise, beneath abbey bells and whitening sky, the animal has once more become a mirror in which human worry studies its own face. After dawn fully enters the abbey, the world becomes ordinary again, though not less strange. That is one of the quiet tricks of medieval morning frost still shines on the cloister stones. The bells still measure the hours. The same cat may have vanished over the roof like a little grey omen, and yet someone must still fetch water, scrape bowls, mend sandals, sweep rushes, and argue over whether the small ale has been watered more than usual. Mystery may linger, but chores are very good at stepping on its hem. Brother Aelred returns you to the guest house with the expression of a man who has not abandoned suspicion, only folded it carefully for later use. At the door, Brother Martin waits with a cup of warm ale in one hand and ink on 2 fingers of the other. He looks from you to Aelred, then down to the dog, who sits with admirable innocence despite having followed a private investigation through half the abbey. "Did the cat confess?" Brother Martin asks. Aelred narrows his eyes. It appeared. Progress. It appeared above the penitent door. Then perhaps it was seeking penance for stealing the infirmarian's fish. Aelred's mouth begins to tighten, but then, very slightly, it softens. The cold has gentled something in him, or perhaps the cat has. "Brother Oswin does keep cheese," he says. Martin lifts an eyebrow. "So the trail of sin leads to dairy. I've long suspected as much." You drink the warm ale they offer you. It tastes faintly sour, faintly smoky, and altogether like mercy in a wooden cup. Bread follows, coarse and dark, with a little soft cheese and a strip of dried apple. The guest-house fire gives modest heat. The dog receives a crust from Brother Martin and instantly decides that this monk, unlike many institutions, is trustworthy. When the meal is done, the lay brother tells you that the road west is safer if taken with company, for the forest track has deep ruts, slick roots, and a ford that behaves differently depending on rainfall, moon, and whatever private mood streams possess. A group of pilgrims is leaving after terce, bound toward a shrine town beyond the woods. You may walk with them as far as the old charcoal road, where travellers sometimes make camp beneath a ruined watch post. It sounds cold, damp, and uncomfortable, which by now means familiar. So, when the bell rings again and the abbey gate opens, you join them. There are 6 pilgrims, in all the woman with the scallop shell badge from the roadside shrine, whose name you learn is Maud, the rosary man, called Peter, the second man who fears cats more readily than weather, named Colin, an elderly couple sharing one pack between them, and a broad-shouldered youth carrying a staff, a cooking pot, and the expression of someone who has not yet discovered all the ways a road can insult a foot. Maud greets you with a nod and glances at the dog. He has chosen you still. He is persistent. Then he's either loyal or badly informed. The dog wags his tail, content to accept either. You leave the abbey under a brightening sky. The fields beyond the wall are pale with frost, and the hedges glitter as if someone has stitched them with silver thread overnight. Behind you, the bells fade into the distance, one note at a time, until only the crunch of feet and the creak of leather remain. The road runs first between open strips of land, then through a hollow where last year's leaves lie black and wet, then into a stretch of woodland where beech trunks rise smooth and grey around you. The forest road is not silent, it only speaks differently. Water drips from branches, a jay scolds invisibly. Somewhere far off, a woodcutter's axe strikes with slow, steady patience. The pilgrims walk in a loose line, their breath lifting white. Maud hums now and then under her breath, a tune that might be a hymn or might have begun life in an alehouse before being tidied up for God. Peter counts prayers on his rosary. Colin watches every stump as if it might grow whiskers. You pass a place where strips of cloth hang from a thorn tree beside the road, faded by weather. The elderly woman touches one as she passes. For fevers, she murmurs. Her husband says nothing, but he touches it too. Some swear that sickness can be left in such trees, tied there with knots and prayers until wind wears it thin. Others say the only thing cured is the helplessness of waiting. You do not know which is true, but the little rags flutter softly in the cold air. Each one a wish someone once could not bear to keep indoors. By afternoon, clouds gather again. The road dips through darker trees. Mud returns beneath the frost, swallowing the rhythm of walking in slow, soft pulls. The youth with the cooking pot slips once and sits down hard enough to make the pot ring like a cracked bell. No one laughs loudly. Medieval roads provide too many future opportunities for pride to punish the amused. Maud helps him up, and Peter gives him a piece of advice about placing his staff before his foot, which the youth accepts with the expression of someone who would rather have received a horse. Near sunset, you reach the ruined watch post. It stands on a low rise above the road, only half a wall now, with a broken arch, a scatter of stones, and the remains of an old hearth blackened by travellers before you. Trees crowd close around it. A little stream runs nearby, thin and quick over stones. The pilgrims set down their packs with sighs that seem drawn from the soles of their feet. The dog immediately investigates the entire ruin and finds nothing except a beetle, which he treats as an enemy of moderate importance. You gather deadwood with Maud and the youth while Peter clears old ash from the hearth. Colin hangs a small charm from a branch above the camp, a twist of red thread, a bit of rowan, and a tiny lead token stamped with a saint whose face has been rubbed nearly smooth. The elderly man watches him. Against wolves, he asks. Against night things, Colin says. Wolves are night things. Not only wolves. No one argues. The forest has begun to darken, and the mind is a generous landlord to fear after sunset. The fire takes slowly. Damp twigs hiss and smoke before accepting flame. When it finally burns, everyone leans close, palms out, faces orange against the blue dusk. Supper is simple, coarse bread, hard cheese, a few onions roasted in the ash, and a little dried fish Maud produces from her pack with the solemn triumph of a magician. Peter fills the pot at the stream and warms water with herbs from a pouch. The result tastes of mint, smoke, and iron, but it is hot. And hot things possess authority. You sit with your back against the broken wall, the dog curled at your feet, and listen as the pilgrims begin the old road custom of trading stories. People walking together do this as naturally as breathing. A tale is lighter than bread, warmer than rain, and easier to share than a blanket. It also helps keep the dark at the edge of the fire where it belongs. At first, the stories are ordinary bad inns, cheating ferrymen, a bridge that collapsed after the fattest merchant crossed but before his creditors did, which everyone agrees is suspiciously poetic. The youth tells of a priest who blessed the wrong field and caused the neighbours' cabbages to thrive scandalously. The elderly woman tells of a goose that followed a funeral procession all the way to the church and then bit the sexton, though no one can quite agree whether the goose mourned accused or simply hated sextons. Then Colin, staring into the trees, says, There was a cat in my mother's village that came to the deathbed of every sinner. The fire snaps. Maud sighs softly. Of course there was. Colin does not look at her. It was black, with a white throat. It would sit beneath the window 3 nights before the end. If the dying man confessed cleanly, it went away. If not, it scratched at the door. Peter turns a bead on his rosary. Who judged the confession, the priest or the cat? Those who tell the tale never fully agree, Colin says, which means he has told it often enough to know where listeners strike. The elderly man leans forward. In my father's time, they said cats carried the souls of the unbaptized through the rafters. His wife clicks her tongue. Your father said many things after ale. He said them before ale too. That was the trouble. The fire warms their faces. Beyond the ring of light, the forest stands close and listening. You can feel the old legends settling among you like another layer of cloak. Demons that take the shape of beasts, night spirits that ride winds, wandering souls caught between churchyard and hearth, witches who send their familiars through cracks in doors, cats that see what humans cannot, because their eyes shine in darkness and their feet make no sound. Some of these tales are old as winter fear. Some are newer, sharpened by sermons and court whispers. Some are merely grief wearing borrowed fur. Maud pokes the fire with a stick. My aunt said a cat washing its face means visitors. That is harmless, says Peter. She also said if it washes behind both ears, the visitors will stay too long. That is not superstition, the elderly woman says. That is experience. A soft laugh moves around the fire and the night loosens slightly. You think of the black cat at the town gate, the brindled hunter in the alehouse, St. Scratch among the grain bins, Sable in Ellsworth's cottage, the grey abbey cat on the roof above the penitent door. Each has gathered stories like burrs. None asked for them. Yet human beings, walking muddy roads under uncertain skies, carry old fears and press them into the shapes nearest at hand. A cat is near the hearth, near the cradle, near the dairy, near the corpse, near the night road. It becomes a bridge between ordinary life and the invisible edge of things. Colin continues, softer now. When my little sister took fever, a cat sat on the wall outside our house. I threw stones until it ran. No one speaks. Did she live? Asks Maud gently. He shakes his head. The fire crackles. Peter's beads stop moving. The elderly woman lowers her eyes. There it is again, not cruelty first, but helplessness. A child burns with fever. A family hears breathing change. A doctor is far away, or useless, or both. Prayers rise. Herbs steep. Saints are invoked. Dawn comes too slowly, and outside, a cat sits on a wall because walls are warm from the day's sun, or because mice run beneath them, and grief, having nowhere else to go, follows it. Maud reaches across the fire and places a roasted onion on Colin's trencher. Eat, she says. Ghosts trouble empty bellies more. He takes it without looking up. Night deepens. The stars appear in small cold pricks between clouds. The charm in the branch twists gently above the fire. Somewhere in the forest, an owl calls once, then again, and the dog lifts his head before deciding that owls are above his office. The pilgrims say a prayer together, low and murmured, the words familiar enough that even the pauses have memory. Afterward, one by one, they settle into cloaks and blankets around the fire. You remain awake a little longer, watching embers shift. No cat appears. No demon slips between the trees. Only smoke rises. Wood collapses softly, and human fears breathe themselves into stories before sleep. Around this roadside fire, You understand how the old evil grows not from cats alone, but from darkness, illness, loneliness, sermons, unlucky timing, and tales repeated until they seem older than the stones. The cat becomes the keeper of the threshold because it has always loved thresholds. It sits where light ends and night begins, and people, seeing it there, mistake its silence for knowledge. At last, you pull your cloak close, feel the dog's warmth against your boots, and let the forest sounds blur. The charm overhead turns once in the faint wind. The fire sinks lower, and somewhere beyond the reach of sight, perhaps on a branch, perhaps along the old road, perhaps nowhere at all, a small unseen creature moves through the dark without asking what name fear has given it tonight. You wake before the others, not because you are rested, but because the cold has found a new treaty with your bones. The roadside fire has sunk into a red, breathing hollow beneath ash, and the ruined watch-post stands around you in broken silhouettes. Frost silvering the stones makes them seem almost holy, though in the pale before dawn nearly anything can look like a relic if it is old enough and uncomfortable enough to touch. Your cloak is stiff at the edges. Your boots are worse. The torn-eared dog sleeps against your feet, warm, heavy, and completely convinced that he is doing you a favour by trapping your legs beneath him. For a moment you do not move. You listen instead. Peter mutters in his sleep, one hand still curled around his rosary. Colin lies wrapped tightly in his cloak, face turned from the last embers. Maud is already half awake, staring into the grey trees with the calm, hard patience of someone who has spent many nights on roads and learned not to expect morning to arrive politely. The elderly couple sleep close together beneath one shared blanket, their breaths small and even. Above the fire, Colin's charm of rowan, red thread, and worn lead token twists slowly from the branch, creaking each time the wind touches it. No cat sits beyond the fire, no yellow eyes shine under the trees, yet the stories of the night before remain as clearly as footprints cats at deathbeds, cats beneath windows, cats carrying souls through rafters, cats absorbing grief because grief cannot bear to stay unshaped. The forest is empty of them, and therefore full of them. Maud rises first. She feeds the fire with twigs and blows gently until flame takes. "You look like a man who has slept on a stone," she says. "I think the stone is complaining too." That means you are getting along. The dog lifts his head, sees flame, food preparation, and human movement, and rises into the morning with immediate optimism. Peter wakes next, then the youth, who groans so softly and continuously that it becomes almost music. Breakfast is little more than bread warmed at the edge of the fire, and the last of the hard cheese passed carefully from hand to hand. The elderly woman pours a few drops of water onto the ash before you leave, murmuring a prayer for safe passage and, perhaps, for the next poor souls who must sleep beneath the ruined wall. The road from the watch-post leads through thinning woods toward a small chapel said to stand near an old burial ground. Maud tells you this as she tightens her pack. "There is a priest there who keeps the door open for pilgrims by day," she says, "and a painted altar. If rain has not eaten it, we may hear mass before the next village." Colin looks into the trees. Is it the chapel where the cat was seen beneath the altar? Maud pauses. Everything is the place where a cat was seen beneath something. If the teller needs a story... Peter crosses himself anyway, though almost lazily. A chapel is better than a ditch. That settles it. You walk under a brightening sky, leaving the ruined watch-post behind. The forest road is quieter now, and the sun, low and pale, touches the upper branches with a cold wash of gold. Frost cracks beneath your boots. A squirrel scolds from somewhere overhead, then vanishes. The dog trots ahead, then back, then ahead again, managing to make forward progress look like a committee decision. As the trees open, you see the chapel in a fold of land beside a stream. It is small, built of rough stone with a steep roof patched in several places and surrounded by a low wall enclosing old graves. The stones inside the yard lean at various angles, as though the dead beneath them have been shifting for a better view. Yew trees stand near the wall, dark and patient, their branches holding last night's frost in little beads. Beside the gate hangs a wooden clapper, not a proper bell, and the wind makes it tap faintly against its frame. The chapel door is open. Inside, candlelight glows. You enter with the pilgrims in a hush that arrives naturally, without command. The air smells of cold stone, beeswax, damp wool, and faint incense sunk deep into old wood. Rushes lie thinly over the floor near the entrance. Though nearer the altar, the stone is bare and swept. A small painted rood hangs above, Christ faded by smoke and time, the colours dim but tender red, blue, gold leaf nearly rubbed away. On the altar stands a cloth not entirely white, 2 candles, a wooden cross, and a little painted image of a saint whose face has suffered so much peeling that devotion must fill in the details. A priest emerges from the side door, small, stooped, and wrapped in a patched vestment. His hair is white where it escapes his cap, and his hands tremble slightly as he arranges the altar vessels. He nods to the pilgrims, not surprised to see travellers. Chapels on roads learn to receive whoever the weather delivers. You take your place near the back with the dog pressed discreetly behind your legs. Dogs in churches are not always welcomed, but this one has become expert at making himself look like a draft. Colin kneels near Peter, Maud stands with head bowed. The elderly couple lower themselves carefully, joints objecting under their breath. The youth, unsure what to do with his staff, leans it against the wall, where it immediately slides and clatters. Everyone pretends not to hear, which is one of mercy's smaller forms. The service begins softly. Latin rises and falls in the little chapel, familiar in rhythm even where meaning escapes. The priest moves slowly, candlelight trembling over his sleeves. Outside, the stream runs under its thin skin of ice. A crow calls beyond the churchyard wall. You feel the room gather itself around the prayers, around breath and cold hands, around the simple wish to be held, forgiven, and brought safely to another evening. Then, from beneath the altar cloth, something moves. It is only a flicker at first, a shadow under white linen, a soft scrape. The priest pauses for less than a heartbeat, then continues. Maud's head lifts slightly. Colin goes rigid. The dog behind your legs pricks both ears and leans forward with dangerous interest. Another scrape. The altar cloth stirs. A cat steps out beneath the altar. It is small and black, with one white paw and a narrow face. It emerges as calmly as if it has been attending services for years and finds the arrangements adequate. For one perfectly suspended moment, no one breathes. The priest freezes with his hand above the altar. The pilgrims stare. Colin's mouth opens. Peter's rosary stops mid-bead. The dog trembles with heroic restraint. The cat sits. Then it begins washing its shoulder. This is so ordinary, so completely untroubled by the religious weight of the moment, that the whole chapel seems to tilt between terror and laughter. Colin whispers, "God preserve us." Maud whispers back, "From what? Grooming." The elderly woman makes a small sound into her sleeve that might be a cough and is absolutely not a cough. The youth turns red from holding in a laugh. The priest looks at the cat, then at the altar, then at the congregation. His face reveals the struggle of a man deciding whether this is a sign, a nuisance, or Tuesday. The cat rises, arches its back, and walks along the altar step. Colin crosses himself quickly. Peter does too, though with a faint smile tugging at his mouth. No one can quite agree whether a cat beneath an altar is an omen, a scandal, a sign of mice, or simply evidence that the chapel door does not close well. The old fear stands in the room. Certainly. You feel it. A black cat at the holy table, appearing from under the cloth during Mass, is precisely the sort of moment that grows horns by sundown in any village within walking distance. By night, someone will swear the candles burned blue. By next winter, the cat may have spoken. Give a tale 20 years and it will probably preach better than the priest. But the priest surprises everyone. He lowers his hand, clears his throat, and says in a voice thin but steady, "She belongs to the chapel. She has been discouraging mice from eating the altar linen." The room remains still. He adds, "with more success than certain boys I've asked to mend the door." The youth stares very hard at the floor, though you cannot know whether he is the boy in question or simply feels the accusation on behalf of all young men. Maud's shoulders shake once. Peter smiles openly now. Even Colin blinks, caught between relief and disappointment. Fear, when interrupted by practical information, often looks slightly embarrassed. The priest continues the service. The cat, apparently satisfied that doctrine has survived her arrival, steps behind the altar again and vanishes. The dog slowly lowers himself to the floor, robbed of both chase and revelation. You stand in the candlelit hush, and it seems to you that everyone in the chapel has been asked to choose, very quietly, between panic and common sense. Not forever, perhaps. Only for this one breath, only this one morning. Yet sometimes that is enough. The prayers resume. The Latin folds back over the room like a cloak, but the mood has changed. It has softened. The same candles burn. The same frost glitters beyond the doorway. The same old saints watch from faded paint. Yet the sharp edge of the stories from the night before has dulled against the sight of a small chapel cat doing holy linen work in the least dramatic manner possible. After the service, the pilgrims gather near the door while the priest trims the candles. Maud approaches him and asks the cat's name. "Agatha," he says, after the saint, though she answers to nothing. "Very devout," Maud says. "She sleeps through sermons," the priest replies. "So do many." Peter asks whether people ever complain of her. The priest folds the altar cloth back into place, smoothing it with trembling fingers. Some do, until they see what mice do to vestments and bread. Then they complain less. A cat is only suspicious when someone else feeds it. Colin lingers near the threshold, looking toward the altar. His face is troubled, but not as tightly as before. "In my village," he says, "they would have driven it out." "Perhaps they had no mice," says the priest. "They had sorrow." The priest looks at him then, more closely. That is harder to drive out. No one speaks for a moment. The cat Agatha reappears beside the priest's foot, tail lifted, then rubs once against his patched hem. He reaches down and touches her head with 2 fingers, not ceremonially, not as a blessing exactly, but gently. She accepts this with the solemn arrogance common to cats, then slips toward a little gap beside the wall. You step outside into the churchyard. The air is bright and cold. Frost is melting now in the sunlight, dropping from yew branches in tiny silver ticks. The stream beyond the wall murmurs over stones. The leaning graves seem less watchful in daylight, more tired. Maud stands beside you, pulling her cloak tight. By tonight, she says, Colin will tell someone the altar cat humbled a priest. Is that what happened? No, she says, but it is kinder than some versions. You look back through the open chapel door. Inside, the half-burned candles glow on the altar. The priest moves slowly in the dimness, folding cloth, setting vessels aside, tidying the small sacred order of the place. Beneath the altar, somewhere out of sight, Agatha hunts the small ruinous creatures that hunger for crumbs, wax, and linen. It is not a grand miracle. It is not a dark omen. It is ordinary survival, which in this world may be close enough to miracle after all. As you leave the chapel yard with the pilgrims, the dog at your heel and the road bending toward evening once more, you carry the image with you, a black cat under the altar, a room holding its breath, laughter barely contained, fear gently corrected by the simplest truth. Sometimes evil is not revealed by a cat. Sometimes a cat merely reveals how ready people are to find evil where they expected it to be. The road beyond the chapel feels gentler for a while, though perhaps that is only because the sun has climbed high enough to lay a thin warmth across the fields. Frost loosens from the hedges and falls in bright drops. The stream beside the churchyard trails away behind you, its murmur fading under the steady rhythm of pilgrim feet. Maud walks with her staff tucked beneath one arm, her scallop shell badge clicking softly against the pewter token at her breast. Peter counts a few quiet prayers, but without urgency. Colin says little, which may be wisdom, weariness, or the simple effect of having watched a feared altar cat turn out to be an employee of the linen cupboard. The tawny-eared dog ranges ahead, nose low, occasionally looking back to confirm that you remain competent enough to follow a road. You have your doubts, but you appreciate his confidence. The old couple walk close together, sharing breath and pace. The youth with the cooking pot has tied it more securely now, so it no longer rings with every step like a travelling announcement of inexperience. Around you, the countryside opens into winter strips and low meadows, crossed by hedges and ditches, with smoke rising in blue threads from cottages ahead. By afternoon, the pilgrims turn south toward their shrine town, while your road bends back toward the walled town where the journey began. You part at a fork marked by a stone cross and a hawthorn tree tied with old ribbons. Maud grips your forearm in farewell. Mind the mud, she says. I've become intimate with it. That is how roads show affection. Peter gives the dog a crust. Colin nods without meeting your eyes, and the old woman presses a little dried apple into your palm as if blessing a child. Then they go their way, their figures slowly shrinking along the south track until their cloaks are only moving spots against the pale fields. The dog watches them go, considers whether their crust supply might exceed yours, then chooses loyalty or laziness and returns to your side. You walk alone again, though not quite alone. The road carries every voice you've heard Nan by the inn fire, Brother Martin smiling over ink, Brother Elred staring at frost prints, the alewife defending her mouser, Osric with his sack of rats, Dame Isabel among her herbs, Elswith in her small warm cottage, the priest smoothing altar cloth while Agatha vanished under the holy table. Their words drift with you like smoke tucked into wool. By late day, the walled town rises ahead, its gate dark beneath the lowering sun. The same ditch gleams beside the road. The same broken cartwheel leans near the mud, though now frost has dried along its rim and a little bird sits on the hub as if claiming it for a throne. The gatekeeper is there, of course, wrapped in his fur-lined cap, holding his iron key and looking no more impressed by existence than before. "You again," he says. "You kept the town standing." "Barely. Cats helped." You glance at him. He jerks his chin toward the gatehouse. "Rat in the toll chest this morning. Black cat took it." "Evil work!" "Very. Saved me 3 pennies." He opens the gate, and you step once more into the town's narrow lanes, where evening begins folding itself into shutters and doorways. Smoke thickens under the eaves. A woman throws old rushes into the street and lays fresh ones inside her threshold, scattering a handful of dried herbs over them. Somewhere. A bell rings for the hour, the familiar tired note you heard on your first night. It feels as if the sound has been waiting for you, held in the tower all along. You pass the market square, quieter now. The fish stalls are bare. The herb seller packs her bundles. The scribe sands a final letter and blows on his fingers. Beneath his table, you see 2 yellow eyes. The black cat from the gate, or perhaps another like it, sits with its paws tucked beneath its chest, watching the square empty. The scribe notices your gaze. It comes when the mice do. And when do the mice come? When people drop crumbs and blame spirits. This may be the most practical sermon you hear all day. You continue toward the inn with the moon sign, where warm light spills through the doorway. Inside, the hall is much as it was smoke in the rafters. Pottage at the hearth, wet cloaks on pegs, rushes underfoot, bowls, trenchers, ale, low voices, and the small exhausted kindness of people becoming less suspicious once fed. Nan sits again by the chimney breast, shelling something into a bowl. The innkeeper's wife moves with a jug. The black cat slips in before you, tail raised, as if it has completed important business elsewhere and expects the fire to have been kept ready. The dog follows you inside and goes straight under the same bench as before, claiming continuity as only dogs can. You sit near the hearth. A bowl of pottage comes to your hands, thick with peas and barley, and you eat slowly, letting the heat settle into you. The cat circles once, twice, then lies by the fire close enough that the glow touches its whiskers. No one spits, no one crosses themselves. One apprentice watches it warily, then tosses it a crumb of fish when he thinks no one sees. Nan notices anyway, so careful, she says. Feed a cat once and it owns your conscience. The apprentice flushes. It caught a mouse yesterday. Then it owns the mouse too. The room laughs softly. No one can quite agree whether cats were blamed because they truly frightened people, or because they stood too near everything people already feared night. Illness, lonely women, spoiled food, sudden grief, unspoken sin, strange luck, and the invisible border between safety and harm. Perhaps the answer changes from hearth to hearth. In one house, a cat is a guardian of grain. In another, a thief of breath. In a monastery, a theological problem. In a widow's cottage, a companion. In a chapel, a humble defender of altar linen. In a market, an omen waiting to be embroidered by gossip before supper. You look around the hall at the faces turned toward the fire, lined by labour and weather. These people live close to uncertainty. They plant and hope. They salt meat and hope. They birth children, brew ale, grind grain, bind wounds, count candles, hang charms, pray to saints, mend roofs, scald churns, and hope. When misfortune comes, as it always comes, it is hard to leave it shapeless. A shape can be named, a shape can be chased from the dairy, barred from the cradle, watched from a window. Accused in a manor court, laughed at beneath an altar, A cat gives fear a small dark body, and fear, being tired, accepts the gift. Yet beside the fire tonight the cat is only sleeping. The dog snores below you. The half-burned candle on the table gutters, then steadies. Outside, the town's lanes darken beneath mist and moon. Inside, the pottage pot murmurs, wool dries, and old stories soften at the edges. You have walked through gates, cloisters, markets, alehouses, shrines, courts, cottages, keeps, storehouses, forests, and chapels, and everywhere the cat has moved ahead of you, not as devil or saint, but as a question people keep answering with their own fears. And now, as night settles fully over the medieval town, the question curls its tail across its nose and sleeps. So you sit a little longer by the hearth, feeling the warmth seep through your damp cloak and into the tired places of your body. The room grows quieter, cup by cup, breath by breath. The innkeeper covers the pot. Nan's bowl is set aside. The last travellers shift on their benches, drawing cloaks over shoulders, easing boots from sore feet, lowering heads toward folded arms. The old dog beneath you dreams of running, one paw twitching softly against the rushes. The black cat opens its eyes once. They shine amber in the firelight, not cruelly, not kindly, simply awake for a moment in the dimness. Then it closes them again. The bells outside give one final distant note, thin and silver, and the sound drifts over rooftops, through alleys, past shuttered windows and sleeping horses, past the gatehouse and the broken cartwheel, out toward the frosted fields. The town rests beneath it, the road rests. The shrine candle has long burned down. The abbey cloister lies quiet under moonlight. Elswith's cottage is dark except for embers. Dame Isabel's herbs hang still in the rafters. The keep storehouse is locked. Grain safe for another night, in the chapel. Perhaps Agatha sleeps beneath the altar cloth, curled near linen and old stone. And you may rest too. You do not need to solve every shadow before sleep. You do not need to decide whether every tale was foolish, frightened, tender, or true. The medieval night is wide enough to hold them all: the charm at the door, the prayer at the bed, the cat by the fire, the dog under the bench, the candle burning low, the quiet hope that morning will come gently. Let the old fears loosen their claws. Let the mud dry on your boots. Let the smoke rise into the rafters and disappear. The fire settles into red. The hall softens. The dark outside presses close, but not unkindly now. You're warm enough. You're sheltered enough. The cat sleeps. The dog sleeps. The bells are silent. And somewhere beyond the walls, beneath a patient winter moon, the road waits without asking you to walk it yet. For now, you breathe slowly in the hush of the hearth. For now, the night keeps watch. For now, all is quiet.